Open Meeting Law. Please be advised this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the Bloomberg Public Access Channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook. And it will be uploaded to Lunenburg Access YouTube after the meeting. The agenda, which is at lunenburgma.gov, under the calendar, has the Zoom link and the telephone number. And with that, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First thing on the agenda is announcements. The one I would remind everyone is that on Monday is the town caucus. Several open seats that are important to fill for that, and that is the easiest way to get on the ballot. The other way to get on the ballot is you collect signatures. So I forget what time the caucus is at, but 7, and it's at the high school, right? Yep. In the auditorium. With that, is there any public comment from the public?
Good evening, everyone. John Bowen, 162 Highland Street, Lunenburg. I just wanted to highlight some things. I know that you have a plan to go over some capital plan items, and I just wanted to give some history. So in June of last year, the Cemetery Commission came before this board, and they said that they wanted to have a discussion about rules and regulations regarding perpetual care sale of lots in an email to Ezekiel and Adam Costa. As Cemetery Commission Chair, I have asked if we could have both of you join this meeting in expense of the town for a board that doesn't know what perpetual care or sale of lots funds are. Just as a reminder. It says, I do not have the experience or the knowledge and expertise on these matters regarding the state of Massachusetts, and because both Ezekiel, who's here tonight, and experience, I have requested that you both join this meeting. This is a problem when we have a board member who doesn't know what they're operating or what they're running. Allow me to continue, if you would. Adam Costa comes at a serious cost to this town, as well as the time of Ezekiel, who's being paid to be here tonight, and these are costs that should never be incurred by a board. That being said, I've gone over the board with this committee before about the waste and expenses, or the wasteful expenditures of the Cemetery Commission, spending money to cut grass and to do all sorts of things. I've also brought before this board information with regard to rules and regulations that are promulgated without first taking into the financial effects of those of which Bill Bernard, back in I believe it was November, brought before this board a number of different issues and circumstances, situations that need to be done with the cemeteries in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, including roads in South Cemetery, expanding the North Cemetery new area, okay? And now the Cemetery Commission has recently voted at their last meeting, which was a couple of weeks ago, that they're not going to take any money out of the sale of lots fund that they would usually take, even though they have a balance of $94,394.66 in that account. They also have an unexpended amount of funds of the $10,000 that we allot at an annual town meeting, unexpended funds of $4,650 because the cemetery commissioner herself, Miss Nancy Yasko, wasn't able to attend a meeting for 5 months for a personal matter, even though the rest of her board had a quorum. So I just want to remind this board that when you make financial decisions for the community, we should make those financial decisions based on the efficiency of the boards themselves and whether these boards are warranted to be able to have access to this money to do these projects. Now, the expansion of the cemetery in the North Cemetery is not a serious issue. We still have some 80 plots in the North and South Cemetery that we can get. We don't bury 40 people a year here. We bury like maybe 3 to 10, maybe 15, Maximum I've seen is 20, and usually most of those people already own plots. So the selling of 80 plots is really not an issue. So I'd like you to take that into consideration about the expansion. It does need to be done, but the funds need to be expended appropriately. And when you have a board who says, let's collect interest off of our sale of lots funds by not taking any money out of it, when the interest rate of the sale of lots funds, and Ezekiel can attest to this, is 1.8%. Same thing with the perpetual care fund, of which they receive roughly about $4,000 to $4,500 annually, when their account balance in the sale of lots fund is $219,000, which has to go to the state treasurer, and they give them the interest to use for perpetual care. They have an interest balance in their account of $20,078.77. A capital plan item for $50,000 to piecemeal a section of land in the North Cemetery is appalling for anybody to spend that kind of money on a piecemeal basis. They're going to put dirt roads in there. They're going to do some paving and stuff like that. And I know this was a request of Carter, okay? But it's wrong. It's financially irresponsible, okay? The capital plan request of $50,000, okay, is ridiculous. Now, if we take the costs calculated from the $96,000 and we subtract $50,000, $4,650 of unexpended funds, that's for the skirt in the South Cemetery they need to repair, that they put on hold because Miss Yasko was on vacation. I'm sorry, forgive me, she wasn't on vacation. She was handling a personal matter, okay? And she wasn't available, even though her board had a quorum, to be able to continue situations. She said, stop all work. Okay, there's minus $4,650, minus $20,000, which is what the DPW gets from us allotted every year for the cemeteries out of our tax levy, okay, equals $21,439.27 will be left over in the sale of lots fund had we subtracted all of that from the sale of lots fund. The cemeteries are unsustainable in a cemetery commission direction where they're at. It is going to continue. Bill even told us he needs one more cemetery worker to run 2 machines. We have 2 machines. One sat there all last year. Okay? That's another employee to run a machine. There has to be a union employee. It's union equipment. It has to be a union employee. That's $80,000. Okay? What Bill is asking for is the right approach. Bill has a good plan. He has a yearly plan all the way up to 2032. This is the plan we should be paying attention to, and we should be ignoring all else when it comes to the management and maintenance and leave it to the qualified people who happen to be William Bernard. And I would suggest that William Bernard did ask for $50,000, okay, for the cemetery project. But if you take Bill aside and you ask him, is it better for us to take $225,000 and take all the needs and fix them? Would that be a better use of money over a period of time where we have an inflationary rate that's going up 4.5% every year? That $225,000 is going to turn into $500,000 in 4 years. I just wanted to make sure that this board is aware of that and that they take actions, okay? They take actions that are efficient, okay, with regard to fiscal responsibility, not regard to a need. We don't need things in the cemetery like crack filling. That's a paint over tape. That's a paint over tape, okay? We need roads. We need curbs, okay? Right now, I have sent you all a PowerPoint presentation, which you should have received in your emails. If you haven't, and you're having difficulty, okay, reading it, okay, you can read that PowerPoint by copying and pasting it into your browser, and it'll pull up, it'll pull up a PowerPoint presentation if you're having difficulty. Some people in town, like the town manager, had some difficulty reading that. But I just wanted to just inform you that in there, we show the immediate needs right now for the cemetery, for the work that needs to be done that's actually laid out by the cemetery superintendent in the DPW. We're at $532,000. And if you read my PowerPoint presentation that I sent to you all, you'll see we don't have $532,000, do we? Taking a piecemeal approach to fix something by putting paint over tape is not a suitable process. To hold $96,000 back to collect $1,800 worth of interest in a year is not a suitable process for the handling of funds of which this board holds. And I just want to let everybody know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John.
And thank you for giving me a little extra time, Mr. Chair.
Any other public comment from the public? And if you have any public on the Zoom, just raise your hand. All right, any public comment from the board? All right, one thing I did have that I wanted to pass on is I did reach out to our Representative Scarsdale, and she got back to me, budget-related things. The one thing she would encourage everyone is she calls it a call to action for the community leaders on what is called Project 211. I think Project 211 is the 211 communities that are at hold harmless levels as with respect to Chapter 70. I did get invited to a webinar of some sort. I think some members of town were able to get in. I wasn't able to get into it for some reason. It was an odd Zoom link. She also said, with regard to helping, she says, I hope you are familiar with the budget asks of Project 211, which I helped craft. And there's a three-pronged solution. One, supplemental budget to get funding into the districts for this fiscal year, an increase to the fiscal year 26 budget that the House is about to take up, and a request to establish a commission to make recommendations for changing the problematic school funding formula. So I think 1 and 2 would probably be Band-Aids in reality, but number 3 might try to really solve this problem for a formula that really doesn't work for a lot of communities. So I did want to pass on that communication from Margaret. She also, works closely with Representative Kuntz-Merrick and Senator Cronin. All right. With that, public comment is done. Any town manager or finance director reports? No. Okay. All right, so let's go on to scheduled meetings. So this is the last official scheduled day for our department hearings, although something tells me that school department may have a number 2 coming up, but we've done that before. So the first one up, though, is Council on Aging with our new director, Deb Goodsall. Did I say that right, Goodsall?
Yes, good.
All right, all right.
And Polly Roy, who's our outreach coordinator,
All right.
is going to be joining as well. Mr.
And
Here?
you can sit there or up here, but that works for sure. And let me just get this. All right, I think there's a little delay on the back, shows us.
Here we
Okay,
go.
But
Wonderful.
over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here today. I just wanted to go over a little PowerPoint with you and just let you know a little bit about the Council on Aging. The mission of the Lunenburg Council on Aging is to advocate for improved quality of life for all seniors through supportive services, programs, and education. So that's what we do on a daily basis. When we look at this, if we go to the next couple, I just wanted to introduce myself. Deborah Goodsell, and Pauline Roy is from Lunenburg, and she's been at the center for 7 years now. So she's helped quite a few of your seniors here in town. So they have experienced what we do have to offer. I was actually at the Clinton Council on Aging for the past 10 years. And I'm sorry if I'm a little nervous. It's all,
Don't be nervous.
This is
We're
all new.
we're friendly.
I never had to do a PowerPoint before. So when we look at the statistics for the town of Lunenburg, you've got 11,705 residents. 3,767 of these are over the age of 60. So that's 32% of your town's population are seniors. So the senior population, because of the baby boomers, is going to continue to grow over the next 5 years. They expect it at 2030 to kind of level out, and then we'll start seeing a decline. But the number of seniors will continue to grow over the next 5 years. When you look at the summary statistics, this is basically at the Council on Aging. We have a system called My Senior Center, so we can pull statistics. So from January to December, these are the amount of individuals on the right on an average daily basis. So you're looking at anywhere from 50 to 75 people a day, which over the last couple months, that has increased as well. We had 40 people for bingo today. We have 40 people for Women's Club tomorrow, and those are just 2 programs. When you look at the congregate meals, and those are the meals we prepare on site, we've got 255 people during that year participated in meals at the center. 264 of those went to fitness classes. And then you have a summary on the other side. So we serviced, and this is a number of those who checked in. There's a lot that come in that don't check in at the kiosk. So you're looking at 1,275 residents were serviced by this Council on Aging last year. So what are the needs of our senior population? Basically, our budget, we did very minimal, and it's just to support these needs. Nutritional services, including the on-site meals, support in social services, which is a lot of what Pauline does as far as health insurance, hoarding, scams, financial assistance, legal referrals. So there's a lot of that we do. Food assistance, help with housing applications. There's a lot that we help out our seniors with that is very overwhelming to them. Educational programs, exercise well-being programs, socialization, which is key. Those people who socialize are healthier. Their mind, their body. So it just over the side, just the social services tells you some of the things. Grandparents raising grandchildren. I did a letter for Senior Connections today regarding opioid use. There's a lot that's going on with our senior population. Nutritional services and socialization. The number one issue for me this year is nutrition. Because even if a senior is able to make meals themselves at home, they're not always doing it and they're not always nutritional. So, just as an example, every night my grandmother would have a piece of cheese on a cracker because she didn't want to make a meal. So this way, at least if we get them into the center, we can serve them a healthy meal, they're socializing, and they're getting their basic needs. So that is one of the things. If you go to the next slide, we're looking at our meal site manager currently is 19 and a half hours. We're looking to increase that to 36 hours and be able to offer meals at least 4 times a day. 4 times a day, no, 4 times a week. Breakfast, some lunches, even maybe a dinner on Wednesday evenings when we're open later. And also, we'd like to, there's no kitchen staff that works on Fridays currently, so Meals on Wheels goes out on Thursday, and we don't see them again till Monday. So that's, if there's a Monday holiday, we don't see them till Tuesday. So Meals on Wheels is not only just a meal, it's a wellness check. So it's a big gap of time that we're not putting eyes on these individuals. So basically, what we want to do with the budget this year is we have an opening for an assistant meal site manager. We're not going to fill that position. We want the full-time meal site manager. And then we have 2 kitchen aides that are actually in the budget as well. So our budget this year is a modest increase of $30,000 over last year, and that will take care of our needs in this next fiscal year. So basically, at the end here, I just want to thank you. This breaks down to spending $72 for a senior in the town of Lunenburg. And thank you. Any questions for Pauline or I?
Sure, and you did a great job, so.
Thank you.
Just for newer members and maybe the public, this request did come forward last year, and we had some questions about it. And in the end, the request was not brought forward. So in my, personal opinion, I do think it's a good idea. I think the Council on Aging is not a huge budget item for the town. And it does serve quite a few people in town. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that the committee may have.
Do you have any questions, Mike?
Can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
This was a need last year. It's still a need this year. I mean, if it wasn't, like I said, if it wasn't needed last year, we wouldn't be asking for it again this year. So just so you know that, it is definitely a need.
Okay.
So the Meals on Wheels, is that something that's happening every day now?
Meals on Wheels is Monday through Thursday.
Monday through Thursday, okay.
Yeah.
And that's going to continue?
That will continue, yes. Yeah, Meals on Wheels is for homebound, so that's not in the center itself. They're delivered through Mock, and we have volunteer drivers, and we package them up, and they're delivered to their homes. But like I said, we don't deliver now on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and if there's a holiday on a Monday, there's 4 days they're going without somebody checking on them.
Right, okay. Can you tell us what kind of programs you run with your programming? You have a line item that you're increasing about, you're increasing from 5,000 to 7,500.
Right.
Can you tell us what kind of program you
Yeah.
so used to run since you've only been here for a couple of months?
The type of programming is basically socialization and entertainment. We also have, educational programming where they can come in and, learn about something. They also have education, like if you have heart disease or you have diabetes, we can have an educational where we have somebody come in. Not all these people are free.
Right.
Also, too, when we have an event, we do have, if we have the Memory Cafe, which we have once a month, we have an entertainer come in and a lot of times it's music, because music uses both sides of your brain. And those entertainers range between $150 and $250 for the hour.
Okay,
So the entertainers are more expensive, the supplies are more expensive, we're doing more exercise, more fitness, we're doing more crafts, hands-on, dexterity. So we're going to be adding a lot more programming to our already full schedule.
And a lot of those costs are going up each year, too. People are asking for more.
Right.
yeah. Do you find that you gave us a statistic that you serve about a third of our total seniors, is that 1,275?
32% of the population of Lunenburg
Right.
are seniors.
Do you find that these programs kind of help engage seniors and bring them into the center, and that kind of opens up for a relationship?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's some individuals that, I had one gentleman come to me this week. He said, this is my life. This is what I do. All his friends are there. He comes for the meals, he comes for the entertainment, he comes for, socialization, to keep their mind sharp, even pitch, cribbage. They're using their minds, they're keeping it sharp. Book club, we're doing the community read coming up. We've got all the St. Patrick's Day programming coming up. There's just so much going on, and it's their place.
Right.
It's where they go, it's where they feel comfortable, and it's also where, after coming each day or several times a week, they feel comfortable going to Pauline and saying, hey, I gave this guy on the phone my credit card number, and now there's $2,000 missing from my account.
Right.
So like I said, they feel comfortable. If they weren't coming on a regular basis, I don't know if they'd feel as comfortable as.
Yeah,
they
you
do.
got to build a relationship
Right.
in order to build that trust, and no, that's good. Well, have you talked with the town manager about your request?
Briefly.
All right. What was her response?
She's kind of new.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay. Well, I think it's, something that had been requested before. It seems to be all your request is on realizing that position. It seems reasonable. And last year, this committee, the Finance Committee, requested that anyone who we bring new to not be half hours, right? I think the proposal last year was to be 26 or 28 hours, to be 30, to be a full-time position.
Yeah, I think, the discussion we had last year was that, the moment you go over 19 hours, it's
Right.
now a benefited position.
Right.
So there's kind of a lot of costs that come with, if one takes benefits, that if you're only going up to 24 hours, there's a lot of cost for those residuals. So
Right. So it's good to see that you got to 36 hours.
Yeah.
And the employee, you had spoken with the employee, and she's
Yes.
ready to go?
Yeah, our
Okay,
current meal side manager is agreeable to going to 36 hours.
perfect. All right, that's all I got.
Anything?
That was my question. I just want to let you know that I've heard through my own mother-in-law who attends this program that since you've been there, there's been a huge improvement of programming. So I think the community's already seeing that. And I just appreciate it. So, yeah, you
good to
always
hear.
ask all my questions.
You know,
I
we
like
should
to see-
switch here.
No, I don't want to. So, yes, so just thank you. You did a great job, and this is a real huge asset to the town. And some of us are getting near that 60 mark, so.
They
You don't
actually
have to
set
be
50.
60, right?
You can be 50.
No, the Lunenburg Adult Activity Center is 50 plus.
Oh, well then, that's it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, their lunches are fabulous because the dessert is just superb.
Tom, any questions? Jean?
Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, guys.
Valuable service.
Thank you. We're all set?
Yeah, well, normally what we do is we open it up to the public if they want to ask any questions. So is there any questions or praise from the public?
Ron Delicio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just had one quick question. I heard that seniors can go to any senior center in the state, and you keep track of all your visitors. I was just curious how many come from other towns.
Most of ours are from Lunenburg. Once in a while, and some of ours from Lunenburg go to Townsend, they go to Fitchburg, and some of those towns come here as well. But most of ours are from Lunenburg, and like I said, we do have, depending on what the activity is, we may have some people that come over that from Townsend, or,
Correct. Seniors
Yeah.
kind of find the activity they love, and they'll
Right.
follow it to all the senior centers.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
play that game of, which is on this day here and this day there.
yeah.
I was just curious
Yeah.
about
There
how
is-
that.
Yeah, bingos Mondays in Leominster, Tuesdays in Lancaster, Wednesdays in, yeah, they know exactly where the things they like are.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rhonda.
So how competitive is the cribbage?
Oh, very,
Okay,
very.
let's stay away. All right, Karen?
Good evening, Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. I just had first of all, you had a great presentation. I had the fortunate pleasure of going in last week and meeting with Pauline and meeting the new director. So that was a great introduction to the activity center because I hadn't been there in quite a while. I do have a couple of questions. Now that we are ages 50 and over, are the numbers that you presented today, did that include those, the ones that are between 50 and 60?
No.
Is that everybody, your total participation?
No, the numbers here are 60 plus.
Okay, so your numbers could actually be a little bit higher?
Karen, can you get closer, maybe your mic, or it may be the booth? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's not me. Is that any better?
No.
Is that any better, Anna?
I think Deb's
I can hear
numbers
you.
for like the seniors in Lunenburg.
Yeah, so-
whatever that
so
was,
if-
3,700, I think. That is 60 and older. As to who's
Okay.
going to our senior center, I would say the majority are still over 60. There's a few people here and there, but it's definitely a minority number.
Okay, and is there, I know years ago, there used to be a nominal fee to outsiders using our facility. Is that still the case, or is that no longer in existence?
Currently, it is not, but that is something that I did at my previous center. So if we had a craft and say it was $20 and the seniors are paying 10, Lunenburg seniors are paying 10, we pay the other 10 out of the program budget in order to make it cost effective for them. But we wouldn't pay somebody from Fitchburg's extra $10 out of the town budget. I don't pay for other people from other towns out of our town budget if it costs money.
Okay.
So, but, I mean, eventually, we probably would charge a nominal fee for those who are not from Lunenburg, because like I said, this is Lunenburg's town budget. And, you know, they have, their towns have their town budget.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. So that's proof that I'm not the only one that can't hear my wife.
For the record, I can hear you just fine. I don't know why you can't hear me.
That's awesome.
Dave Passios.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just coming on to tell you that I believe you all need to get closer to your microphones. When you turn towards them, on my end anyway, I can hear you clearly. The minute you turn even a little bit away from them, I cannot. So after my many years of experience up there on that stage and at the conference table, I believe you need to be closer to those microphones. Appreciate it because we're losing quite a bit of the content. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. All right. So I think with that, you are now free.
Thank
very
you.
much.
By the way, we're talking your wife into doing crafts.
I know. I know. And do you need a bingo caller still? Is that one of yours?
No, we actually had, like I said, our first bingo, and it was really great today, and we had Kate called bingo, it was awesome.
Okay.
So, but if we do, I have to call.
All right. I know I have school department next, but I would assume Monty Tech is going to be a quicker, maybe presentation discussion. So I might ask that we flip those.
Yes.
Did you send us a presentation?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So do they have the thumb drive in the booth? Okay. I'm just trying to make sure I have it. I have like a PDF.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. I will get it. I pulled up this one, that was my problem.
Thank you.
low seat. All set, or should we wait, or?
Just give me 1 second. Yeah, I got it, it's just opening. Thank you. All right. Okay.
All right, great. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Brown. I'm the very fortunate superintendent at Monty Tech, and I'm joined by, who I will humbly say, and I hope I'm not offending, the greatest business manager for a school district ever, Tammy Crockett. Very fortunate to have her as part of our team.
Can you pull the mic a little closer?
Certainly can. Bring it right to me. All right, so I'm quickly going to just kind of go through, give everybody an update of some of the overarching themes of what we try to do in terms of our budget at Monty Tech and what's going on at Monty Tech, and then Tammy will walk everybody right through the full budget. So very quickly, if the first slide, which I'm sure will be popping up, we just want to make sure that everybody sees that, we are a district that is very mindful of the impact that this has on our towns. And when it comes to developing our budget, we're not somebody or a district that's going to go way over, it's net school spending or anything like that. And the first chart just kind of shows it's all the various vocational, regional vocational districts. Monty Tech all the way down at 23rd in terms of per pupil expenditures. Again, trying to stretch the dollar, try to be as economically careful in terms of our town's money. How we really take care of a lot of that and supplement that is grants. We're very fortunate to have a wonderful grant writer. I have a great administrative team that finds those grants. Obviously, you start off with the first grant slide that talks specifically just about the general grants that you have eligible to us through federal support. The Perkins grant is a grant that speaks specifically to vocational training. And we do have some personnel that fall under that. The IDEA grant is the grant that supports special education. Again, we do have some staffing that's along with that are part of that, and obviously Title I supports is funds that go along with supporting families of low income. So yes, we do have over $1 million in those federal grants, and obviously, as everybody knows, if you watch the news, some of the conversation is supposed to be going to be happening to that. Hopefully, that won't be the situation, but obviously, that would have an impact on our budget. In terms of competitive grants, so far this year, Monty Tech has been able to earn $2.7 million through competitive grants. You can see that's a nice growth over the last couple of years. And then the following slide there kind of breaks down what those grants fall into. So there's cybersecurity grant, the partnership planning and the implementation grants speak to a program that I'm going to talk to a little bit about, a special program that we started called MVP Academy. Equitable Access Grant is a grant that's just helped to support students of the special populations after they've been enrolled at Monty Tech to support their needs. The Clean Energy Center grant, again, will be part of MVP. I'll talk about that a little bit. And I'll talk about some of those other grants in some other slides there. We do still have 2 outstanding grants that we're hoping that we're going to hear from. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to say that by the end of this fiscal year that we've had $4 million that we've earned in grants. So I spoke a little bit about MVP Academy, and I'm going to try to be very brief about it. Everyone, I'm sure, or most of you are probably aware of the concerns that are happening at vocational schools in terms of capacity. Monty Tech typically has an incoming freshman class of around 350, 360 students, yet we have 850 applicants. So we are saying no to the vast majority of the applicants to Monty Tech. So a few years ago, just after I became superintendent, we decided that we wanted to try to see if there was other ways to support those students. And we started an initiative called MVP Academy. We earned a lab modernization grant, which typically is used to enhance a particular shop program. What we chose to do was we found a warehouse about 1.5 miles down the road from Monty Tech. We have leased that warehouse. Our students are currently completing, our students and instructors, converting that warehouse into 3 vocational training programs for currently house carpentry, electrical, and eventually we'll be adding plumbing. And we partnered with 3 of our sending districts who had significant wait lists, Fitchburg, Gardner, and Narragansett. And what we've put in place is we've basically created a new version of what's called an After Dark program. After Dark programs, vocational schools, obviously the kids leave 2:30 and we're wide open, so why not use it for workforce training? So some districts were working with their sending districts to have, a dozen, 15 students come over in the afternoon and get a couple hours of workforce training. We decided to enhance that because when we talked to those superintendents, they let us know that their kids couldn't do something after school. They're serving as the childcare for their siblings. They're doing a job that their parents need. So we said, let's do it during the school day. So we're the first district that has a program like this. We have currently 80 students from those districts coming and accessing the house carpentry and the electrical training. The most important thing is those students stay enrolled in their sending district. So the Chapter 70 money remains in their district. The only money that Monty Tech accesses is the small amount of money that comes from those students being Chapter 74, which is vocational trained. So that's a reimbursement that comes back to Monty Tech. We truly believe that this is the way to address the capacity issue with vocational schools. We truly believe that other districts hopefully will do this. We were very proud when a member of Commonwealth Corporation, which is a state-level organization that does a lot of grants to support workforce training, referred to that they were looking forward to see the Monty Tech model might become something that other people do. So we're very pleased with that. And you can see the numbers of kids that we had from the different towns and everything else. But a great program, but very much because we have those grants. A grant that we are probably one of the most proud grants we have is this Young Adults with Disabilities grant, again, coming through Commonwealth Corporation. Everybody deserves the dignity of being able to get a job. And workforce training for folks with, especially young folks with disabilities, is relatively non-existent. There's some great organizations out there that are doing a fantastic job, but unfortunately, a lot of these folks are being ignored. And Monty Tech, this grant was offered. We were the only vocational school in the state that stepped up to do this grant. We provided workforce training to about a dozen students last year. This year, we've doubled that. We're up to 25 students. The goal of this grant is to complete with job placement. We had some great, the Hannaford in town here helped up and did a fantastic job supporting our students. Stillman Farms stepped up. They hired some of our students at the end of this program. I call them students. They're older folks. It's anyone from 18 to early 30s. But it was just fantastic. And watching these kids get their certificate and during the program, at the end of the program was fantastic. So again, a great grant. Sometimes we have to bundle grants. I'll just quickly go. We truly are one of our, both of our spray booths are super old, but one of them basically was built when the school was built. We had goals of replacing that spray booth. And when we put it out to bid and it came back, we had some pretty good sticker shock when that came back and realized that's not going to happen. So we sat back and we just went looking for more grants. And we took some Perkins money. We were able to earn this Donnelly grant. And most recently, we were found out that we had the funds and we could start the process to get that. So again, the goal is to get these grants and not have to require the towns. And we also most recently did get an anonymous donation. That's allowing us to also get some heavy equipment. Operators is a huge piece right now, and getting that training through simulators is going to be great. Want to make sure everybody knew, you may have been seeing it in the newspapers, there are some talks about admissions where it stands right now. On the left of that slide, I want to make sure everybody understands that Monty Tech has been adjusting every year for the past 4 or 5 years, Monty Tech has been adjusting its criteria for how to accept students, making it much more able for folks to score their full points on the selective criteria. Most recently, we expanded the grade from 100 to 70, would get you full credit for points and everything else. However, just these past couple weeks, if you aren't aware, the Department of Elementary Secondary Education has a proposal that would change admissions policies across the Commonwealth for vocational schools. What it would do is it would allow districts to use 2 selective criteria, attendance and discipline. Attendance number right now they have is 10 absences per year over the 2 years of middle school. And discipline, which would only allow to be assessed things like what's essentially called the big 3 from Chapter 37, H&1/2, which is assaulting staff, bringing a weapon to school, or drugs and sale of drugs and substance abuse. Thankfully, in most of our towns, thank goodness, you don't see a whole lot of that happening in the middle school. So basically, the vast, vast, vast majority of students get full credit for that. That would then allow, if those students make it through those two hurdles, that would allow to have a lottery. So it's a qualified lottery. That would be done as long as your district agreement specifically spells out how you're dividing things up. It would be done by town. So what would happen is we would have some time in Lunenburg, or we would do a and that would just have people come in and do it all around at Monty Tech. The students who would apply, if they qualify for the lottery, literally it's a random lottery pulling names. And, if the count for students, that whatever that is, again, by town, that those students be the students that get in. The most important piece of that is that it's by town, because if it was just random, the biggest concern would be you have no idea as a community how many students you would have end up going at Monty Tech. Fitchburg, obviously is the largest of our towns, 250 to 300 applicants. You can only imagine what would happen to their budget if it was 88 kids is what they typically have. But let's say just because of where the balls fall, they now have 110 kids going to Monty Tech. That would devastate their community, and certainly something similar could happen to Leominster or to Lunenburg. But the good thing is that they will allow us to do it by town, so you'll be able to keep track and know what your approximate number is going to be in terms of the budget. Co-op is a huge piece. We want to thank all our community partners that support our students. Co-op allows students, instead of spending time in shop, they go directly to the real world in terms of workforce. We have lots of co-op partners in Lunenburg that are supporting our students. Last year, we set a brand new record of 235 students out on co-op. Basically, 1 in every 3 of our juniors and seniors was out on co-op. This year, we're already at 228, so we're pretty confident we're going to set another record. So we thank everybody for that. We gave you a couple charts that have just the post-graduation plans of our students. You will see, because some people have concerns about, well, there's some kids going to college. Well, yes, we have programs where kids have to go to college when they finish. The example that I keep going to is you're going to see, if you look at it, our kids from our health occupations program. When they graduate, they have their CNA. They could go and become a CNA, and they could have a job. But as many people know, the salary for a CNA is nothing spectacular. It'd be hard to live on that job. So for them in order to move up, they need to go to college. So we do have shops that go to college. If you look at our construction trades, the vast majority of those kids are going right into the workforce. I want to make sure you're aware that we do have a wonderful continuing ed program called Monty Tech Nights. The best part of that is we offer no-cost workforce training for adults in most of our different trades, certainly our construction trades. This is a program that goes through Mass Hire, which allows, again, people to get no-cost training. It goes over for several months. Excuse me. And this is an example of some of those graduates that we've had, and we're just about to go for round 10, so we're looking forward to get that grant. And for what it's worth, you can see that all the different towns that participate, and Lunenburg actually is our 4th highest participant rate in terms of all our programs that we have currently in continuing ed. And last but not least, I haven't met Jennifer, but I'm going to make sure we have that happen. We love to do community projects. If there's a project that needs to be done around the town, please reach out to us. Excellent, good. Last year we did a wonderful energy audit for Town Hall. Our HVAC and property maintenance kids came out. It was the first time they were able to use that equipment because we earned that, again, by a capital skills grant. But if there's stuff that we can do, give us a call. So now I'll turn it over to Tammy.
Thank you. I get the not exciting part to talk about, but nonetheless. So on the PowerPoint slides that we gave you, I'm starting off on the foundation budget rate section. It's a separate section. Because I talk about the importance of the foundation budget with our budget, because we spend so closely just to what our foundation budget is, I thought it's important just to start you off with what is the foundation budget? What makes it up when we talk about rates? This spreadsheet
shows you the rates that the state assigns to 11 categories: administration, instructional leadership, classroom teachers, going across the top. You can see those. Then going down the side, they assign rates for each grade level. As they get older, it gets more expensive to educate those students. And as you see, vocational education is the most expensive form of education, excluding special education. So for regular type ed, vocational gets the highest rates, and I've highlighted those rates for you. Couple of categories to point out is vocational education gets a higher rate. These are per pupil, these rates that you see here. In classroom teachers, well, because our trades, because of safety concerns, we have smaller ratios of students to teachers, so we have it's more costly for teachers. Another large difference between the foundation rates between comprehensives and vocationals are in the instructional materials, equipment, and technology. And again, we're purchasing pieces of equipment like a lathe that could be $150,000, and there could be 4 of those in a shop. So our equipment and just our general supplies of wood, copper, all that tends to be more expensive. So we get higher rates per pupil there, as well as in operation and maintenance. Of course, we sustain all our own operations and maintenance, so all our plowing, everything is done at the school level, as well as maintaining all the equipment. So there's some differences there. So you can see that just at the base level for vocational education, we get $17,354.29 per pupil. So when Mr. Brown spoke about that MVP program, and he said we get the difference between the regular education student and the vocational student, the bill we will be sending the communities is the difference between that $17,354 per pupil and the $11,714 that you can see below it, which is the high school level. The numbers above it are what's called above base, so you get additional funding for these types of special populations. So you have your special education, low income, ELs. You can see for each student that you have in those groups, you get what's called incremental increases. So you can see those numbers below. And we happen to be, as a school, in low income group 6, which is based on the number of free and reduced lunch students you have in your district. So we're group 6, so we get additional $56.62 per pupil. That kind of makes sense. Now those numbers come into play when you look on the next slide, which is Monty Tech's specific foundation budget. So you can see in column 7, we have 1,488 vocational students. That's our foundation enrollment. So what foundation enrollment is made up of is the students that live in our 18-member towns that are actually enrolled and attend Monty Tech. The students that live in our 18-member towns that attend another vocational school under the school choice program, as well as we have a post-secondary practical nurse program that is also Chapter 74. So the pupils that live in our district towns are also counted in there. So that's the 1,488. Then what the state does is they just multiply out those pupils by those rates I showed you on the slide before by each category. So the administration category gets multiplied out, so forth, to give you that first number in row 12, column 7 of the 25 million. The other to the right, columns 8 through 13, as I discussed, those are duplicative counts of students, but they're the above base. I like to point out that in column 8, it says special ed in District 74. We have well over 74 special ed students at Monty Tech. We actually have in the 230s. But if you look at the legend down on the side of this, it says special education is an assumed percentage of enrollment. So for non-vocational K-12 regions, they assume that number at 3.97% of your enrollment. If you're a vocational school, they assume it to be 4.97, which is far fewer than non-voc schools have and voc schools have. But in any event, that's the additional bump you get there. We have no students who are special ed tuitioned out. You have to be able to attend Monty Tech to be a student there. We do have short-term placements, but they can't be in long-term residential placements. So we have nothing there. Moving over to column 12, we have 14 EL students at the school. That is actual, and you get the above base for those. And then our low-income pupils, 484, and you get the above base for those. So they add all that up, and they give in our foundation budget, that's the number they calculate. For Monty Tech for FY26, it's calculated at $30,990,414. If you divide that out by the number of pupils, you'll see that our foundation budget per pupil spend is $20,827. Now, foundation budget in our case is synonymous with required minimum net school spending. So that means that's the minimum we have to spend on educating our pupils, and it cannot count meals, transportation, debt service, capital expenditures. Those are all outside of that and above. So those numbers come into play later. That's why I like to point those out. The next slide is a brief summary of our Chapter 70 state aid for this year. So I'll briefly point out rows 2 through 5. I just showed you how our foundation budget was calculated on the previous slide. The next row 3, the required district contributions, that's for the 18 member towns of Monty Tech using the wealth model that the state uses to come up with each community's required contribution to their school districts. So for Monty Tech, of all 18 communities, it's calculated at that 12,227,609. They take the difference and they come up with your foundation aid or Chapter 70 for FY26. In our case, that's an increase of $290,597. If that number, we are not hold harmless this year. We talked about the hold harmless with the 211. We were hold harmless in FY25. And what that means is the difference in your state aid coming in row 5 is less than what they would give you for the minimum per pupil. So in our case, the minimum per pupil this year would be $111,600. So in some instances, your aid is calculated to be less than what you were getting in the current year, and that's why they call it hold harmless. They're not cutting your Chapter 70, but they're not giving you any increases to it above the minimum that's set for that year. In this case, it's set at the $75 per pupil. We have more, so we're getting that $290,597. I'm just going to move over to the right really quick. We talked about our foundation enrollment, the budget. We talked about the district contributions. We're going to see that in a minute. We just went over how Chapter 70 is calculated and our required net school spending. I want to point out here, you can see that our required net school spending goes up by $872,000 from 25 to 26. We're only getting $290,000 in Chapter 70 increase. So the real burden gets put on our communities through the formula. You can see communities are already going up $580,000 at the minimum. That's that funding situation we talked about, where it's not adequate funding for school districts and communities. The next slide is our fiscal year 26 budget summary. So I break it down into the categories of spending. So we talked about, I'm looking at 26 now. We talked about our net school spending requirement on the previous slides. There it is. Transportation. Our transportation costs for 26 are $2,544,520. That's for the 30 buses that bring our students to school every day and bring them home. We're going into our 4th year of our contract, which is an optional year. We do a 3-year contract with two optional years. And this was a pretty low increase for us, as well as we were able to eliminate one of the buses. So you can see going up only 28,000 in that regards. It was very favorable to the district. Our above net school spending is proposed to be $606,410. That is 1.9% above our requirement. So again, we keep it very close to our actual net school spending. Capital, $450, and vehicles, $500. The two of those make up approximately a $10,000 decrease from the current year. So you can see our total budget for 26, $34,641,344, which is an increase of 3.51%, which a lot of that being driven by our net school spending requirement going up 2.9%. The next category is our Chapter 70. We saw how that's calculated, which brings us to the required minimums, which is Titled 1, the $12,227,609. Again, that number is determined by the state. The next section is the other component of the assessment. So here, we take our transportation plus our above net school spend and add those up. From that, we subtract our estimated transportation aid, which we're estimating at $2 million based on our cherry sheets. We have a regional transportation fund. So regional school districts receive reimbursement back for transportation. We're looking at approximately 78% reimbursement back for 26. If we get above, Monty Tech gets above what we've estimated in the year, the school committee votes, instead of putting that into excess and deficiency, which is our free cash, similar to towns, they vote to put a piece of that into what's called our regional transportation revolving fund. That monies have to be used in the following year to reduce community assessments for our transportation component. So that's what that $200,000 is. We're proposing putting $250,000 of our excess and deficiency account against this category, leaving net transportation and operating to all our towns, $700,930, which you'll see how those shake out. Our capital budget, $500,000. We propose putting $250,000 from E&D to that, leaving $250,000, which leaves a total assessment for all communities, $13,178,539, or 6.11%. The next slide talks about our balances, which I like to point out a little separately. So certified excess and deficiency, I have TBD because I cannot tell you our certified balance. It's still with the Division of Local Services, Department of Revenue. But I can tell you we can have approximately 1.6 to 1.7 million in our E&D account. We can hold up to 5% of our operating budget in that account. I estimate that we will have somewhere between 1 million and 1.2 million in our certified balance, but I can't say that till I get word back from DOR. And we're proposing using approximately half of that, or $500,000, to offset assessments. We put a small amount each year into our stabilization account, so you can see the balance there, $371,743. We try to maintain a stable capital budget each year and fill in what we need for capital building projects in those amounts. We are slowly building the stabilization account so that those mid to higher range projects that we have coming down the pike, like our electrical main gear, we can tap into the stabilization funds so that we can still maintain consistency in our assessments to our communities. as well as our OPEB account. We have just shy of 50,000 into that. We put nominal amounts into that each year as well. As you know, that's the other post-employment benefits that we have to fund for future health insurance and other fringe benefits for employees and retirees. The next slide gives you a breakdown by function of what goes into that $34 million budget. So you can see a couple of actual years, the approved FY25 budget, as opposed to what we're proposing in '26. And I'm going to talk about quickly about a couple of the large increases there. I'll also point out, I just spoke about OPEB and stabilization. You can see at the bottom of this page, transfer to OPEB, $20,000 for FY26, and transfer to stabilization, $30,000. The next slide speaks to some of the larger increases, or what makes up that increase. We have a 3% COLA in our collective bargaining that's already been agreed to for FY26. And with step and column movements, that comes to $580,731 of an increase. Our fringe benefits, we're estimating a 5% increase in that, and that's $438,000 of the increase. Utilities and insurance. So the insurance component of that would be your property, your comprehensive, your liability, those type of insurances. We're looking at approximately $96,000 increase in those. And then academic and vocational programs, equipment and supplies. We slashed what was requested from our shops and academic programs quite a bit, but still comes up to approximately $103,000 of an increase over FY25. And again, we're purchasing steel, wood, food. So our supplies do not get any cheaper each year. They go up just to run the programs and have enough for the students. The next slide shows you this is the required local contributions by town, and it shows you a quick glance at the changes. So focusing on Lunenburg, you can see that the foundation enrollment goes from 99 to 101, increase of 2 students. The required minimum contribution goes from $1,172,254 to $1,270,711, or an increase of $98,457. The next 2 slides show you how that's broken down, and how the state calculates that, and that is by the community wealth model that I spoke of at the start of the presentation. So every community has this exact calculation done for them to find out what the state figures they can afford to pay for their schools. They use 2 numbers at the base, the property values and the income levels of the residents. So you can see rows 1 through 3, they're using the 2024 equalized property valuations for Lunenburg. So you can see the number. They multiply that by the property percentage. That 0.3243 is used for every single community, that percentage. They come up with the local effort for Lunenburg from property, that's $7,701,756. The next section, they use 2022 income of residents. They multiply that by the income percentage of 1.5699%, again, across the board, all communities, to get Lunenburg's effort from income, $8,906,443. They add the 2 of those together, and they call that your combined effort yield. That is what the state says they feel Lunenburg can afford to pay for all its school districts that it belongs to, $16,608,199. rows 8 and 9, 8 is the foundation budget attributed to Lunenburg. So it's Lunenburg's portion of Lunenburg Public Schools foundation budget, as well as Lunenburg's piece of Monty Tech's foundation budget. That's the $24 million number. They take 82.5% of that because every community, no matter how wealthy, at least gets a minimum of 17.5% of state aid, Chapter 70. So they come up with a value there, and they say which number is lesser, what the town can afford to pay, or that 82.5. So for Lunenburg, the lesser is what they've calculated you can afford to pay, $16 million. We shoot over to the right side. They say, what's Lunenburg currently paying for its required local? $13,768,233. They then multiply that out by the municipal revenue growth factor, which is 4.08 for Lunenburg. That number varies by town, calculated by the Department of Revenue. So they come up with Lunenburg's preliminary contribution, $14,329,977. They compare that to 10, what they think you can afford to pay, and they say there's a shortfall there, which I've cut down to row 21. There's a shortfall of $2,278,222, or 9.42%. So in row 23, it says if the shortfall is below 7.5%, we're going to multiply 2% onto what we calculated for you and add that as well to your required contribution. So that's how they come up with row 26, Lunenburg's required FY26 minimum contribution to its school districts of $14,605,342. The next slide shows you how that gets apportioned between Lunenburg Public Schools and Monty Tech. So I'm looking at rows 5 through 9 because that pertains to 26. So you can see the foundation enrollment for Lunenburg, 1603, foundation enrollment for Monty Tech, 101. What's Lunenburg's portion of each of those communities' foundation budget? You can see the numbers there. Lunenburg, Monty Tech represents 8.7% of Lunenburg's total foundation budget. So we get 8.7% of that $14,605,342, which they've calculated out to be the required minimum, as well as you can see Lunenburg Public represents 91.3, so that's where their 13,334,631 comes into place. The next slide is a breakdown of Lunenburg's 2 years assessment. So what's happening in FY25 as opposed to FY26. Foundation budget, which is the number of pupils times our $20,820 per pupil spending, that's with a $2 million. The required minimum contribution, we just showed you how that was calculated. Lunenburg's portion of Monty Tech's operating assessment. So Lunenburg represents 6.79% of Monty Tech's operating assessment. And that is calculated, and it's in your budget book, by Lunenburg's foundation enrollment count of 101 divided into our total foundation enrollment number. That's where the 6.79% comes into play. The capital assessment for Lunenburg is calculated by your school attending children number in grades 1 through 12. So my office reaches out to the school district every year and gets your school attending children number for Lunenburg, grades 1 through 12. We take that number, divide it into the total school attending children in our district, and that's how we get the apportionment for Lunenburg's capital piece of Monty Tech, which is 6.49% for FY26. An important note, that's also Lunenburg's quota number for the freshman class of incoming freshmen. So you get 6.49% of the freshman class that was just voted on last evening by our school committee of 360 students. So that's how your assessment's calculated. So you can see where the proposed 110,359 increase to the assessment, how that plays out. Most of it comes from the required local contribution that's calculated by the state. The last slide I have for you just shows you the breakdown of all our communities, how the assessments look for all our communities, which I don't need to go into detail for you because I've already pretty much showed you how Lunenburg shakes out. But that is the end of my speaking piece, and I apologize if I took too much of your time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
You guys understand all that?
Yep.
You can pass out the quiz.
Oh, good. And I apologize for time's sake. I didn't want to take too long, but I do apologize. I know I went a little long.
No, and I appreciate the present. Where are you on budget? Have you voted as, your school committee has voted on it?
Yes, voted last evening.
Last evening?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any questions down the? Mike?
No, I mean, this is all state mandated, essentially.
Most of the budget increase is, that's why we remain very close to our required net school spending number. Fortunately, it's because of those grants that Superintendent Brown spoke about at the start. We're able to purchase an $800,000 spray booth from grants. Our budget and even our entitlement grants, if grants are cut, even entitlement grants, our budget would look very different.
Yep.
We'd either be making cuts in the district, we wouldn't be able to purchase the newer equipment. So we've been very fortunate in our grants.
That's all I have.
So I appreciate that you're going through everything and, you guys are going through the formula. We sit here, we have to balance all the priorities and, sometimes we ask this question to different departments because, departments come and present and they would like everything they would like. And, when we talk with them, we have to balance, is this really a reasonable request knowing of the limited funds that the town has? Mm-hmm. We push it back. That's a gentle pushback.
Yes.
My question for you, and that's what's hard, your assessment has gone up by 6.85%. Last year, we had to pass an override to support our school district. We have another, big deficit, and we can't just, I'll tell you, they're getting close to half as much with extra money. How you in the community of vocational schools, how do you see this playing out for small communities, like us? I also saw the general spending. So while we were paying $11,840 per pupil, one of the columns that you had, out of the same column, Fitchburg pays $4,600.
Yes.
And I don't want to, Sterling, they're paying $16,000 per pupil. How do you see this being sustainable for communities like us? How can we keep investing in more in some students and not all?
Great question. Mm-hmm. It's not sustainable. It's not.
No, I
And
get that.
that's why we have to keep advocating to our legislatures because our budget, the schools piece of Lunenburg's increase equates, the part we have control over equates to about $12,000 of the $110,000. The rest is from the state formula, which to your point, based on the wealth factor, Fitchburg has a lower per pupil, Athol has a lower, Harvard, Holden, they are paying $16,000, $18,000 per pupil. Lunenburg, $14,000. It's not sustainable. We agree with you. We would have to agree 100%. And we work with the legislatures too to
Right. I mean, Project 211 that was mentioned earlier, it's what the steps need to be taken. I know the word is that they're forming a commission to take a look at the formula. What I've been hearing is the earliest they would expect the formula to change would be 2029. It's a long way away. So, again, we and MASS, Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, is a big supporter of 211. Because we do see that this is, as Tammy said, something needs to change.
What I worry is that it's going to be a breaking point. I mean, Lunenburg, I think our children, I think it's about a quarter of our children are under the poverty line. So our numbers are definitely going up. But, you have a town that has, when the property value is being assessed for everybody, well, a quarter of our population is not living in those properties with a really high value. And what I worry is that it's going to get to a breaking point. And if we don't, it can get really ugly if we get to a breaking point where we're fighting, trying to provide for our schools, but we're mandated to do elsewhere. And it would be great if, if there's forces coming from everywhere trying to help these small communities speak on that note.
Certainly.
Yes. That's it.
I have a question. When you answered Mike, you said most of the expenses are state mandated. What expenses in this budget are not state mandated?
Yes, so if you look at the budget summary on my presentation, we are above net school spending by $606,000. So that is not mandated, as well as our capital is not mandated. So that's $500,000. So for the $500,000 of the capital piece, we're putting back $250,000 of the school's savings account, we'll call it. So the assessment, the net assessment to the communities, the 18 is $250,000 for that piece. And the other piece of the assessment takes into account transportation, which is mandated. But the $606,000, we are above. We are. And that kind of goes back to when Superintendent Brown, on his very first slide, showed you where we are in spending against vocational schools in the state. It's because we want you to know that we hear you. We do. And we're spending in the bottom third against our peers. So we're really trying to keep that as tight a rein as possible. And I hope that answered your question.
It does. So is there a percentage of wiggle room in what we need to pay because of that, those expenditures that are not state mandated?
So if we say cut $100,000 from that above, Lunenburg would see a 6%, so you would see 6,000 of that decreased. Yeah.
I just looked at the budget increase for the entire school.
Yes.
It's 3.51?
Yes.
That's pretty good. How did you do that? What was your, did you have to cut programs? Did you have to cut things?
Not
How did you get
programs.
to that?
So fortunately or unfortunately, we did slash approximately 1.8 million out of our first version of the budget. As a vocational school, we're fortunate that when we make our first set of cuts, it's from supplies and equipment. So a shop wanted a $60,000 piece of equipment. We said, sorry, not next year. Before we have to go to faculty, we didn't add faculty. We do have the MVP program faculty, but everything that's associated with MVP is fully grant funded. So we use no Chapter 70 or no community monies to fund that program. So we're able to, before we go to the personnel, we're able to go to the supply and equipment, which is where we went.
What was your health insurance increase? Was it?
So I'm projecting 5%. Our health insurance plans run from December 1st to November 30th. So I already know what our first 5 months of that fiscal year health insurance is, because it's part of this year's. So we had a 6% increase this year. We are self-insured. So this is a very optimistic, conservative budget increase for fringe, for health.
I know, so to me, that's the number one thing. How are you spending the money? And it seems at a 3.5% total with, it's with the way things are and what we see in our town level, at our schools and our other departments, that's pretty good. I congratulate you on that. As far as what we pay is, as you mentioned, based on the state calculations, and if we don't agree with the state calculations, we can talk, but you guys and us are both kind of stuck in the system, and that's kind of where it is. Do you have any suggestions to what we should be asking our state reps and senators to do?
Fund more.
Yeah, basically, that's what it comes down to. The state needs to take more responsibility for the general Chapter 70 funding money. When it pours down to the towns, and as you said, and it can be the slightest, we know in, Lunenburg is an example of a town where, assessments went up all of a sudden on properties. That had a huge effect on you folks, but as an individual, homeowner, that's not necessarily your fault. It's whoever came in and assessed the property and everything else. So factoring in, taking a look at how that impacts people, that's the big piece.
Thank you.
Questions? Who's your busing with?
So we have AA, we have D, and we have McCarthy. We bid by town. We put route packages together because I find that a D bus who services the Fitchburg, Lunenburg area and have their garaging there, they're cheaper. Whereas a McCarthy who has their garages in Hubbardston, and they service those areas, and AA does our Wachusett region, and they do the Wachusett schools. So we find that we get better pricing when we do it that way, because we're so outstretched.
Okay, but you do say that there's one more option year after this fiscal year.
Yes.
Do you expect a pretty big increase? I
No.
think we're seeing big increases.
No. Again, it's approximately 5%, but it's a option that is solely in the school's hand to decide. That's why I only ask the school committee to approve 1 year at a time, because I'd like to see what the market looks like at the time. If all of a sudden, I don't think it'll happen, but all of a sudden competition came in and they were sharpening their pencils, and that's the issue, lack of competition in some towns. They know only one bus company is bidding on the routes, so they feel like they can go up. So I wait to kind of see what the market looks like closer to that time frame. So this time next year, we'll be looking at, should we go out to rebid or use the rates?
Is there any way of comparing the deal you're getting from D with the deal we're getting from D?
So it's certainly is public information to ask what we pay per bus per day. So I'm happy to share that. Happy to share that with the town manager, to share it with you, 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know if, I guess my question is more like, is there a way to have an apples to apples type comparison on it? I mean, you are,
Our busing setup is different than yours. I will imagine you have tiered because your elementary grades, your high schools, you probably have 2 or 3 busing each day, where we have one bus each day to and from. So It might not ever be a full apples to apples, but I'm always happy to share any information you're looking for.
Do you drop students off at their homes or at one location?
No,
We explicitly tell the families when they first enroll is that you can be up to a mile away. And we will take that mile when we need to.
yeah, unless it's unsafe, we look at case by case. If they're on a main street or there's for some other safety reason, but our rule of thumb is no, because we have so many kids we're picking up so far apart that our buses would start at 4 a.m.
Do you find
As it
that,
is, our buses are rolling just after 5 a.m.
do you think that factors into the cost of your busing as well?
Well, it could, because we require, as a regional school, we're required to pick up students within a mile of their home. And these are high school kids, so, that's a different story than a little. So that could, because there's less pickups.
Yeah, I find it crazy that buses stop and then go to the next driveway and stop and then go to the next driveway. And, I don't know, it's a different world. What?
It said,
Especially when you're behind them.
Yeah, yes, true.
True story.
It may be, you mentioned it, you got high school kids, which are
Yes.
14 to 18 versus 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds,
Yes.
7-year-old. That's
Totally
apples and
different. Yeah,
tomato juice.
yes, yeah.
You know the percentage of students that ride the bus as opposed to those who don't, who may drive, who may be older, whose parents may bring them?
We have less, handful of parent drop-offs. We have approximately, what do we have, like 200 students that drive?
Yeah, and we've definitely seen an increase in student drivers to the point that we attempted to expand our student parking lot and found that if we did that, we were going to have to install a drainage pond, and we were not going to go about doing that. So unfortunately, we still lack the parking. But these last 2 years, we've seen an explosion in student drivers.
So do you have data like per town, how many are enrolled and how many use the busing system?
Yes, we do have that because when we have to attest that at least 75% ridership, but when we do bus evacuations, we do actual counts. We start the year with everybody officially gets a bus stop. So we plan for everybody. Then as the year goes on, we see, we have limited parking, so we can only allow our students who are on co-op or who have a designated need to have an after-school job. They support, their families or help the families. So we have to limit. We'd probably have more kids driving as well if we didn't have limited space, but we certainly have those numbers of riderships based on our bus evacs. Yep, and I'm happy to share.
send them? Awesome.
You know it.
Great.
Happy to.
I'm looking at the programs that you offer. Are there programs that you would like to add, trades that you would like to add? And are there trades that, that are falling out of need, favor?
I guess what I'd say in terms of the falling out needs, the only thing I would say is there is a set of vocations that the state has identified as, I think the phrase they use is declining. We do have one program, cabinet making, that falls into that category. The reality is with cabinet making is that with the onset of CNC machines and so forth, that, the person doing the actual cabinet work is being replaced by a machine in many ways. But we still know that there's need for that, especially in the communities, areas that we live now. To be honest, we don't talk a lot. We did just add the veterinary science program at this point, it's going to be about 7 years ago. But the one thing that we know, again, going back to the capacity issue, is if I sat down here and said that Monty Tech is looking to build a brand-new school, and if you didn't hear, last year Whittier proposed a new school, and it was going to be $455 million. I don't think that I'd be getting a good answer if I sat down and proposed that to everybody right now. So to be honest, we don't really think a lot about adding new programs because we just don't have the space.
Okay. All right. Any other go-backs I don't think Jay ever joined. Any questions from the community?
We're just glad they're there.
Yeah, no, I mean,
welcome.
yeah,
Trades.
yeah, the trades are very important. I thank you.
Thank you,
folks.
thank you very much, and thank you to Lunenburg Public Schools for being gracious and having us, letting us come first. So thank you all very much.
Call me, Jen. We'll build something.
I don't suppose I can remind you that we're looking for a superintendent, right? Is that?
What's that?
form?
You know, no, sorry, no.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. Look, we're on to schools.
I pulled this from their,
We just added it into the file.
Oh,
20
they
minutes
just
ago.
did?
Yeah. Even some is about a minute ago.
literally.
Yes. Working hard over there.
Chris, do you want me to call the Lunenburg School Committee to order?
All right. Do you want the budget overview?
Brian needs to call us into order.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Brian, do you need to call?
Yes, it is 8:36 p.m. and I'm calling the Lunenburg School Committee to order. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Into the booth. We still can't really hear the Zoom. I do not think this microphone is on. So, or the speaker, I guess, is on. All right.
Hello? So I think we'll start with the overview page.
That's the the four color one?
Yes.
All right, and a link was sent to you're talking the summary one, right?
Yes.
Okay. A link was sent to us, all of us, right? Or was it just me?
I'm going to share it with you again right now. Should have something coming into your email inbox.
No, I have it.
Okay.
I just didn't share it with everyone, I guess.
It's in that file. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everything's in there.
Okay,
It's like 10 things in there.
okay. I didn't find it again. My apologies. Okay. We have it up in front of it. I have it up in front of me at least, and it's being shared. I don't know if I can zoom.
So I guess we can start with introductions.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Hello, good evening, welcome to the new members. I'm Kate Burnham. I am the superintendent of schools.
I have Juliana Hanscom here, who is our Director of Special Services. She's a familiar face here at the table the last couple of years. New to the district this year, Dr. Gilson is our Director of Finance and Administration, and Dr. Bookus is our Director of Teaching and Learning. So hopefully we have everybody that can answer any questions that you might have about the budget this evening. So we can start with that one-page overview. If you start with our starting point for developing the budget for FY26, back in the spring, there was an override, and the school committee on June 5th voted and approved their budget lines for that override budget, which was $24.8 million. Back in the fall, because Lunenburg was received additional Chapter 70 funding with the final state budget, the school committee requested at special town meeting that those additional Chapter 70 monies be allocated over to the school department budget. So that gave us an additional $31,882. So our total adjusted budget for the school department for FY25 is $24,883,376. So that's our starting point.
And if you don't mind me just interrupting for a second, there's questions about how the override, whether it was part of the budget and everything else. By law, it has to go to the school, to the stated purpose the first year. After that, technically, it can go elsewhere, right? So I think there's some questions that have been asked that can have a technical answer and a practical answer. I think the practical answer is the way we budget in town is we always start from the prior year's budget. So when you're talking about percentages, that override will always be kind of in the school budget, even though technically it doesn't have to be. So yes, there's no bait and switches going on. It's not that we put it into the schools and it's going to magically show up anywhere else. So I just kind of want to get that out there because I've heard some questions on that. I've seen maybe some, again, technical answer versus practical answer. So 24,883,376 is, as you said, the starting point.
Correct. So we had an original number from the interim town manager, but then more recently we got an updated figure from our new town manager. And that new revenue number for FY26 is $904,098. So the town manager's target budget number is $25,787,474, which is a 3.6% increase from what we have currently in FY25. Side by side on this overview chart, you can see that there are two other budgets for comparison. I think we'll go through and talk about all of them sort of simultaneously. So if we thought about relative to personnel included in each of these different versions of a budget. There are 28.5 FTEs in personnel reductions in the town manager version of the budget, 7.9 FTEs in the needs-based budget, and all positions would remain in a level service budget. When we take a look at the level service budget relative to the salary increases, we're looking at apples to apples. So if we were able to keep every position that we have currently in this school year, next year, so it's a comparison from FY '25 to FY '26 level service, the salary lines would be an increase of 5.5%, or a total of $944,099.
I have a question. What happened to the $29 million budget? Because I thought what you presented.
Yep. So
Because
it would be helpful to me if we could stick with this comparison of the level service. So the level service that I talked about back in January, and we talked a little bit about kind of like that worst-case scenario, because right about that time is when there was a federal grant freeze that was announced, and people were concerned, what would happen to our budget if we didn't have our federal monies? So that 229 figure was, with the gap of a 3.5, was if we had level service and we had zero other funding applied to our budgets. That situation, to the best of our knowledge at this point, is not something that we're anticipating to be happening. So the level service numbers that you have in front of you now apply all of the things that are listed here. That original number that was put out did not have revolving funds applied as offsets anywhere. It did not have the title grants applied as offsets, and we apply those as offsets in every single budget year.
this is the presentation you gave to the school committee on 2/26.
This is the presentation that I gave to the school committee last night.
I'm talking, when I ask you.
Yes, oh, yes, the slide was part of that discussion. However, actually, I think that was part of the February 5th discussion.
Well, I'm looking at your presentation from 2/26.
Because we included all of those numbers from the previous two presentations, we pulled information from those in. What I'm trying to say is, this information that we presented last night and that we're starting with tonight is really what we think is the most pertinent, updated numbers to be looking at with different versions of a budget.
I hear you. I just hope you appreciate that the town has been living in this fear of a $29 million budget that, and until, about 10 days ago, this was the number that had been given to the town. And so
that evening when I presented that slide, I actually stated that was not a number that we were looking for in a budget, that was not a scenario that we were looking at or planning for, but that was to answer a question relative to what would our budget look like if we did not have those other funding sources. I was pretty clear after I put that up that was not a situation that we were looking for, that was not a number that we were asking for, nothing that we were planning for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in the context of this overview document, there are links to the personnel cuts that would be attached to each of these. I will say that the school committee has not yet finalized which particular cuts would be part of the town manager's budget. However, they recognize and they're committed to that we will have to figure out what personnel reductions are made in order to get to that number. It's a matter of fine-tuning, adding another cut and removing a cut that is less desirable to reach that budget number. So,
If I can just,
Yep.
1 second. Who watched the school committee meeting last night? And I did as well. All right. So just, if you have 5 hours to spare tonight, you can watch it. But the end, my take on it is that they are still working through how to prioritize where to cut, whether there's fees that can be applied. and they did not take a vote on a budget that is typically taken prior to coming to us. Last year and this year, we've found ourselves in a situation where we have potential significant budget shortfalls. So we have done kind of a two-step, maybe even a three-step as it relates to the budget. But as it stands today, the school committee has not taken a position on this budget. So we're kind of hearing a little bit of in progress at this point. That is going to lead to maybe a future discussion when we talk about how to get from here to town meeting and some of the upcoming steps that we have. But that's kind of where we are today. Is everyone in agreement with the school
Yes.
committee? Okay. Okay.
So I guess my point of clarification is for anybody who clicks into these links and takes a look at the list, that list is, there's potential that that list will change when the school committee makes their final decision on which positions, or later in this form, the expense lines that they cut. Relative to the health insurance, as you know, we had the 14.84% increase to all departments in town. And you can see what the various numbers are within each of these different budgets. The lowest figure is actually in the town manager's budget, and that's because there are that many positions reduced in that budget. In the middle budget, the yellow budget, the needs-based budget with fewer staff reductions, you see that that number increases. And it's actually the same for the level service, because even though there are positions that would be restored for level service, no cuts, the positions that are on the cut list for the needs budget, none of those particular staff in those positions currently are taking health insurance. So that's why the number is exactly the same.
If I can stop for 1 second. So I think for clarity on this form, it should probably state increases associated with each of these, because sometimes it's budget, and then I think sometimes you say the increase.
Yep.
But if we do like a walk from where we started to these items, it would probably be best to have what the increases from the prior year's budget.
So I think the budget sheets that you have this evening have been modified from the version of the sheets that was provided to the school committee and posted last night. And it does show a dollar value increase as well as a percentage increase line by line in that, which the health insurance line, as an example, is in each of those budgets as well.
Okay. And did you verify these numbers today?
We did. So do we want to get to that now, or do we want to?
Whenever you want to. You can continue going through this if.
Maybe we do a quick finish through with this, and then we can come back and address that one for you. There are offsets that are included in all of these budgets. We have federal grants that we receive annually. Those are entitlement grants. We also pursue state grants, some of them competitive, and we've been pretty fortunate in recent years to have been awarded several grants that are issued through the state. But what you have here, if you click into that link, it'll give you the breakdown of those federal grants that we receive every year. As well, we've given you a breakout of the dollar value that we have applied as offsets in different portions of the budget, all against salaries from our extended day revolving account, our facilities revolving account, and our athletic revolving account. In the case of the town manager's budget, no athletic revolving account was applied to salaried positions in the needs or the level service budgets. Relative to transportation costs, because that's another one of the bigger drivers for the budget increases, D-Bus is our general education bus service. The contract rate is going up 7.6%. So you see that line increase compared to FY '25, and the dollar value there, $69,300. Vanpool is our special education transportation service. Their rate increase for next year is a 7% increase, and that applies across the board to the vans, to monitors for the vans. However, you'll see that in the budget, the line has actually increased 27%, roughly 120,000. And that's in addition to the percentage increase on the rate. We had to budget for additional vans and monitors. So that's why that line is up more significantly. Athletics, in our budget, athletic transportation is up, and we can talk more about that, but the general overview on that is that our athletic revolving account really is not robust enough to sustain the costs for transportation. So we're moving the costs for athletic transportation into the local budget. We can talk more about that if anyone wants to explore that a little bit further. There is some offset to the athletics transportation line in the town manager's budget that you don't see in the other two. That's because in order to hit our target and to be a bit more equitable across the board and seeing cuts in all areas of the budget, we have a Huddle subscription service that we have cameras that record and capture different games on our field as well as in our gymnasium. That service is roughly about $9,000 a year, and it is currently paid out of the revolving account. But if we don't keep that subscription service, we can apply that $9,000 from the revolving towards the transportation line in the budget to help reduce and get to that town manager's target. Out of district tuition, that OOD tuition, that special education tuition placements out of the district, we had to make a rather large increase in our initial look at budgets back to January and early February. Based on information that we had at the time, as situations continue to evolve and we get more clarity, knowing what we know about the individual cases, we are able to reduce that line by $310,000. So we're budgeting for additional students, but making an adjustment based on what we anticipate, the number of placements and the location of those placements.
I just want to be clear on this. So this says a decrease of $310,000 from last year's budget?
Compared to the initial budgets that we put together, there's been an adjustment in that line. So if you go back and look at the budget sheets from the February 5th meeting, you'll see that that line is down in this newest version of the budget, and that's because we've secured additional information relative to the enrollment and the placements that we've been anticipating and budgeting for.
Okay, so again, I like this sheet.
Yep.
But it's kind of all over the map with respect to the information line by line. I think everything we probably should do is probably with respect to last fiscal year. So are you asking for an increase? Do you need an increase from last fiscal year?
We do need an increase from last fiscal year. Yep.
I understand the answer.
Yep.
I'm just saying, as we project the information, I think it should be consistent as to what you're communicating.
As we speak, I'm just adding a little notation, just for clarity.
And you probably should use like standard accounting, like parentheses for negatives and so that it's just, it's easy to see. Because I think we'll be using this sheet.
Okay.
I don't know, I suspect that this
It's-
is a good summary.
It's the cheat sheet, yeah.
Yep, okay.
Kind of hits the highlights of the important big elements driving the budget this year.
Okay.
Okay, there's a little summary as well about utility increases. The line for electricity was slightly underfunded this year. I was advised last year during the budget cycle that we didn't need to fund that line to the level that we were funding that line. And as it turns out, we really should have funded that line at the level that I initially thought that we needed to fund the line. So we're increasing that line, not because we're anticipating a large increase, rate increase for electricity, but because we do need to have that money in the line. Gas, natural gas, we're not looking to do a significant projected increase there. That's after consultation with the Facilities Department here in town, as well as talking to the vendors. Water, we are going to increase the line there. We're thinking that might cover us. It may not be fully sufficient. We may need to eventually apply some revolving funds if that line goes higher than what we're anticipating. But the increases that we've seen in our bills of late are really more a function of the irrigation that we were doing on the grass fields through last summer because we were trying to do some restoration work on the fields. The fields take a beating and they're pretty well worn. And for the last 2 summers, we've attempted to do some restoration to those really worn areas, which again led to the irrigation running and the increase to that water line. So we think that 7,000 in the line should be enough to cover any regular types of increases to the water usage. We won't be irrigating to the extent that we were for the last 2 summers. Each of these has an area here for expense lines. The only place that we put expense line cuts is in the town manager's version of the budget. Our thinking relative to the other 2 versions is that those may serve as a foundation for a conversation should the school committee want to have a conversation about override. And it doesn't make sense for us to severely slash our expense lines if we're talking about an override. That said, if that conversation happens and we want to make adjustments to expense lines as well, we can do that. But all the expense cuts that you see there, again, not fully endorsed yet by the school committee, but that's what's on the table to get to the number. So what you see there may still be adjustments, new things added, other things taken off relative to the list that's embedded here. Salary reserve, we are in contract negotiations with one of our employee unions, and there is a salary reserve built into the budget for that. The salary reserve is adjusted in the needs and the level service because there are more employees that would be carried in those budgets. Therefore, the reserve for increases that should be settled in a contract negotiation would have to be, we'd have to include more employees in the line.
Which union is it?
We're currently negotiating with the paraprofessionals. Chapter 70, this number is based on the governor's budget as of January. And the circuit breaker offset that's been included across the board, all versions of the budget, that number is exactly the same, and that's a 75% rate. So essentially, if you were looking at the town manager's budget, that target, comparing that to our needs-based or our level service, we've outlined what the gap, the dollar gap would be. Again, that's more for the context of a conversation relative to an override if that discussion were to happen. So that's sort of the big picture overview. We can go back now and address the question relative to health insurance.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Gilson.
Okay. I actually have a handout, if you'd like it, like a hard copy in front of you, would you? Okay, let's do that. And if you want to pass it out to anybody back in the audience too, you could. As an employee of Lunenburg, there are 4 different health plans. And once people are hired here, you have an opportunity to elect your health plan as a benefit. And the review took a look at what each benefit was for those 4 plans. There are monthly rates that are paid out by the town, and specifically the school department calculates those monthly, they assume those monthly increases as part of the budget. If you are to look at this sheet that I've given you, the plans are identified. You can see HMO Blue, which is the family plan. Under that, there are 408 employees that would select that plan, for example. And I want to focus on, this is the page that describes the town manager's budget. Then you can look at, if you see HMO Blue, again, there are 29 individuals that have elected that plan. There is a Blue family plan, 17 people are on that. And then there's a Blue individual and then a Blue select. So if you look at that table, the FY25 monthly cost to the district was $1,852.11. If you multiply that to give it applied a 14.84% increase, and again, so you take 1852 times 1.1481, and you get the figure that's in red under HMO Blue, and that number is it's $2,126.96. Okay, then what is done there is everybody that has elected the HMO Blue plan is calculated monthly. So based on that new increase, we're paying out per month for those 180 employees $229,712. Looking across that table there, if you look at the bottom row that says new monthly FY26 total current health insurance participants, if you summarize that entire line with the funding that has been applied on a monthly basis, you're going to come out with the number in the green that is red. And that number is $305,121.90. And so if you take that number and you multiply it by 12 months in the year, you come up with the FY26 annual cost per the plan, which is for the town manager's budget, we're spending $462 approximately. Okay, so that is part of our needs-based calculation. If go to the last page, and I actually had created a whole choose your own adventure to have a little fun, and and anybody could do this on their own time if they want to verify the numbers for accuracy. But if you take a look at the FY26 number that is computed based on a 14.84% increase, that was the correct number in the town manager's budget for insurance. If you compare that to the FY25 insurance expense, the dollar difference I have the dollar difference listed, but the percent change is 16%, and 16% based on that actual number, okay? If we go to the needs-based and the level service budgets, we had very few. This is all dependent on the number of the head count that is selecting insurance as part of their benefit as a member in the Lunenburg Public Schools or town employees. So if you compare the FY26 insurance number, we had very few people in the, actually there were none. That is why the number is the same for the needs-based and the level service budget. Same people on the same plan in both, or same people on the 4 plans in both. So again, the percent change was 21.88% there. So that is our look, our detailed look. It is a 14.84% increase, but the increase is based on the monthly rate for each one of the 4 plans. And so that is how we got our calculation. And if you like math, you can calculate it yourself for every one of the plans.
Everyone should like math.
Yeah.
So this was one thing that I kind of asked, well, through TJ last night, is I did see that on this needs base, you know, it's a 22% actual increase if we were to stay level service. So I was kind of shocked by that number. So that's why I had asked for kind of double checking it and,
Yep.
and making sure that.
The other thing that's a factor too, when you take a look, we went back when we had the override monies, and they set their budget June 5th, the school committee. And we made adjustments to reflect the health insurance enrollment as of May, the previous month, our most up-to-date numbers. So when you're comparing FY25, you're comparing to the head count of the employees and the options that they had selected at that time compared to what our current employees and current enrollment. And while the head count may not be different, same number of positions, the people in the positions are different. People have come and gone. Sometimes people who leave weren't taking insurance, but the person we hired to replace them may take insurance. Or sometimes they're taking a single, an individual insurance plan versus a family plan. And even the employees that we have during a year, because of a qualifying event, like the birth of a child, they may move during the year from a single plan to a family plan. So that number increases. Our health insurance enrollment numbers, every single month, there's fluctuation in them. So it's, while we are saying it's FY25 compared to, you know, FY26, there's so much that changes in this particular portion of the budget. It's hard to get a really succinct, comparable value there, so.
And we have just family, we don't have employee and spouse.
Correct.
And
I don't
employee,
believe that we
spouse,
do.
and
It's
children.
just the
No, it's a
individual and family.
And, yeah.
Have we looked, is that, I think in my,
I'm doing renew for our company, and it's not even worth it.
yeah, what's
there's
not worth it?
It's really not the price. Like, we actually have Harvard Pilgrim. A couple it's almost as expensive as an adult and a child.
See, I had the opposite experience with that. It was like almost half to go from family down to spouse.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, I guess depending on the plan or the provider, it can be.
And what they offer to your tiers, to your group. Like, yeah, I'm sure.
Were you going to say something, Tom, too? Or?
I think we talked about this last year. Oh, there's people over there, but
Oh, okay.
Mary?
This is a
She's
team
our
sport.
resident health insurance expert.
I chair the PEC.
Can you come up to the microphone?
This is the best thing about like working around teachers. Is they like have the answers in their head. Right. I only have the answer because
Great,
I
too.
chair the PEC. So I chair the PEC, and most times when we negotiate, as part of that process, it's actually a really collaborative process with the town. We do look at all sorts of options, and it's actually something, I represent the teachers, our largest unit in the PEC, and it's something that staff asks about, an employee plus one plan. And the last time that we negotiated a agreement and looked at it, the issue is that the health insurance companies to offset those costs, it actually increases the family plan costs. And the last time we looked at it, we had that many more people on a family plan than who would be seeking the individual plus one, that we didn't think it was fair to be offsetting that cost on the families. That's in essence what health insurance companies do. I'm sure we'll survey members again to see if that interest has shifted at all, but we could not do that to the people on the family plan. We just thought it was too much of a cost burden to them.
When's the next time a decision is made relative to health?
Our contract expires on June 30th of this year.
Okay, I mean, I know there's been a lot of discussion on this, but we have to get somehow health insurance under control or else.
So actually, the town manager and I have just set up a meeting. One of the unique things about Lunenburg, this PEC that I keep mentioning, is Lunenburg falls under different legalities around health insurance than other towns because we have that PEC agreement. So, for example, in another town, and we got there because Lunenburg employees gave up a lot in order to get this agreement. At the time, gave up a lot. We probably moved off of 90-10 before other municipalities did. But as part of that agreement that we have, for example, in another town, there's a negotiation around the premium split, and that's the only negotiation. Our PEC agreement includes negotiation over plan design, so it's actually a bit more of a complex negotiation as well that we go through, but there are a few more legalities around our agreement than other towns would perhaps have.
Okay, so do you happen to know either the monthly or yearly associated for the employee?
Yeah, so I'll use me. I'm on a family plan, and I think I pay something like $618 a month for my family plan.
618, so.
618. That's a rough estimate because someone just asked me that the other day.
Which family plan is that? Because they're
So, I was actually just going on my computer to
Probably
look
the
through
one-
things because I think most of us are on the HMO Blue.
Yep.
I got to go look and what that other one is. Like I should know this with the back of my hand, but I don't.
it's roughly a 25-75 split.
It is a 25-75 split. Yep, that's our split.
Okay. And then just, do you have like out-of-pocket maximums and?
We do, and we have a deductible. It's a small deductible. I think it's $250 per person with a $750 family cap. I don't know what our out-of-pocket cap is. It's like, well, but I don't. Am I not answering your question correctly?
What, did you say 750 was your max?
Is for a deductible, but yes. But then there are some prescription out-of-pocket caps and things like that, but people have to spend a lot of money to hit those, or a fair
So
amount of
this
money.
is both medical and prescription?
Yes. Yep.
It's not separate for those?
Correct.
It's not a high deductible plan.
It is not a HDP now.
Right.
Okay.
And I know there has been discussion around an HDP, and we will survey people. I have my concerns. I'm not so sure that we'll have the number of employees, and I could be totally wrong, switch over to an HDP. It depends, on what it looks like, but I'm intrigued to see how many people would be interested in that.
Yeah, it's the worst marketed name for a really good plan.
No, and I know I know that, but I will say one of the One of the few I don't even know what's financial. One of the few financial benefits in Lunenburg, and we know that on the whole employees are underpaid compared to like towns, is our health insurance is better than most towns. But I know, like, you have the FSA and everything like that.
Yeah, if it comes with an FSA.
The HSA, yeah.
Yeah, HSA.
HSA.
Health
FSA is
savings
different.
account, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's triple tax advantaged and you can invest in it. So it's actually a really good thing if you dig into it. I don't know if there's a savings though. So.
Right. So, and that's something, and I will say the PEC has been really diligent. In past years, we looked at the GIC to see if that would be cost savings. It's really been a collaborative effort. I will say I'm a little nervous. We pay for July and June. Open enrollment needs to be in May. We all separate bargaining units have to go through the ratification process. We are on a very tight timeline for negotiating this deal. Speaking as someone who chairs this committee, is also on the superintendent search committee, so.
It's a fun year.
Yeah, yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, was there anything else you wanted to brief, or do you want to go to, this is kind of, I think, a good overview of where you are, and I understand there's still a lot of work to be done with school committee. If there's something you wanted to bring up, we can, or else I can just,
Do you have any other presentation to go through? I wasn't sure.
We don't, but I will tell you that there's a really lengthy slide deck with lots of embedded slides within the slides, because there's a lot of
95-page one?
Yep. There are a lot of people that ask questions, they need context for things, they're looking for additional data, information. It's very comprehensive. There's all kinds of information in it, including impact statements for all of the cuts that we're going to make, data on caseloads for different special ed types of service providers, our behavioral health, social workers, guidance counselors, those kinds of things. So anybody who's looking for any background information, there's lots of it available, embedded in that large slide deck.
okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we, again, go down the line, and if there's any questions, or comments or anything else. So, Mike?
Just I'm not sure about that. What was the override last year, amount-wise?
It was just under $1 million, right?
948.
It's on this sheet, I think, right?
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Maybe not.
No.
I think it was 948.
Okay.
Do you have it tattooed on you or something? It's like the worst tattoo ever. Well, it's actually not. I'll tell anyone what we saw.
You have a no increase in your natural gas costs. Do we have like a contract cost locked in, or are we trusting our utilities not to rack the rates again?
At this point, based on what we know, we think that we're good with that level. Again, we did reach out to Chris Ruth, Facility Director for town, to see how he was approaching it as well. And he was level funding.
We were pretty close this past year, or we kind of overshooting?
I think we're pretty close.
Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
think that as well.
Again, the one that we're concerned about is, in the current year, is the electric line, because it is
It's underfunded.
Again, that was a conversation last year with the town manager at the time, relative to the rates, and she felt that line that I originally submitted was overfunded. And based on her recommendation, we lowered the line, but in reality, what we're seeing coming through for the bills is, we would have been pretty on track with what we had originally put into that budget line. So we are short this year on it.
Okay. And then rough numbers, you have CBA increases in the contracts for this year. Percentage-wise, what was that, you know, roughly increase?
For the ones that are settled for this year, or the ones
Yeah,
that
you have a
in the
line item
salary
here.
reserve that we're working on right now?
Well, I mean, you have a line item here, contract, CBA increases, steps, longevity. I mean, what would go into that? What do you know of that increase for this year, like from last year?
So if we break that down, there is a block there relative to all salaries.
Yeah.
That increase, that dollar increase from, to the level service, assuming that you keep everybody, 944,000, I think, roughly 800,000, roughly, I think, is connected back to our largest group, which is the teachers, which the teachers' contract covers more than just teachers. Our nurses are part of that contract. Guidance counselors are part of that contract. It's not just classroom teachers. It's almost all of our staff are part of that group.
How much are you holding in your salary reserve in the budget?
The salary reserve in the budget,
For this year, in the town, or we've projected,
95, it's on the 95
in
page.
terms of the salaries reserve, if I'm looking at the town manager budget, we projected $90,769 to be held. And that's for the paraprofessional contract negotiations. It is for one administrator salary negotiation. So
and the
we've,
superintendent
yes,
salary negotiation.
yes.
There's a little bit of money there, not a
Yeah.
lot.
So
Anyone
it's-
who's,
Yeah.
There's
So
not a lot.
It's not the same as like, last year we had, the teacher's contract was a major thing that we needed to settle. And we held $379,000 basically in the salary reserve for last year.
but that also, that salary reserve last year also was designed for the paras. We were actually negotiating, contracts should have picked up
I think
for the teachers and the paras. This should have been year one of a new 3-year contract for both groups. So that number was supposed to be for both of those groups. We did settle a 1-year deal with the paraprofessionals for this current year. We're back to it with them to
Try to settle.
to
for
do a
3-year
3-year contract now.
I have a question on your 95-page presentation. On page 83, you had FY's 25 salary percentage per category,
Yep.
Yes.
and then on FY '26, you had, the same thing for FY '26. Is that with the same number head count?
No, that's for the
Right.
town manager's budget with all of the reductions. So
But you
there's,
don't have the reductions finalized. How did you estimate this?
we had proposed cuts in the budget that we presented, so
26.
it included those proposed cuts.
Okay.
Just to negotiations, is everyone paid higher than minimum wage?
No, it's
Which I know you don't have to,
Yes.
but is,
We-
but
You mean
are
for
they?
our, like our paraprofessionals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What-
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
You got anything else?
No, good.
Well, I read all your presentations.
Thank you.
All your data. I have notes. I saw a lot of, we have shifted our behavioral health. We have added social workers instead of just school counselors. And I made a note, are any of those expenses that we do for behavioral health reimbursable by health insurance? And is there a way to maybe shift that model to, where we bring in there are providers that you can bring in someone to do that independently, and they can maybe, like, is there a hybrid model between, offering what we do in school and something that we can get maybe partially reimbursed by health insurance, since we know every child in Massachusetts has health insurance?
Do you want to speak to that in the past model and what we're doing now?
So in the past, we did have a model where we had agencies come in to provide services. And once we had our own social worker on board, she was from the private sector. She had advised us, and I think we did check with the attorneys too back in the day, that we needed to really have an agreement with those agencies to make sure that things happened the way that they should be happening in the schools, and keeping everything as it should flow. So we drafted with our council, town council at the time, an agreement, and neither of the agencies that came into our district to do that service wanted to sign the agreement. So then, at that point, then I think COVID pretty much hit. And then we shifted to, with the ESSER monies, to be able to hire our own social workers and mental health workers for the district, so that we were able to increase that need. Plus, we also, back in the day too, we brought an interface. So that was something that was brought on board quite a few years ago for families to be able to access interface, and that was kind of a broker that helped people access mental health services through their insurances and families. It wasn't just open for students in the town, it was open to everybody in the town. And then since that time, we've also changed from interface to Care Solace, because after COVID, what we found is that it was hard to find providers, and Care Solace opened up, and they were more nationwide with more virtual counselors that were available for our faculty, staff, students, and the town.
So, do you know if there are any other schools in Massachusetts that they still have agencies coming in?
I haven't looked at that, but it wouldn't surprise me if there are some schools that have those agencies coming in. There's just a lot of factors to take into account. And again, if that were something that our school committee wanted us to look to pursue again, I would again involve our council and relook at those agreements, those memorandums of understanding, to see if we could come to that agreement. I will say in a few cases, it did get a little dicey at meetings where we would have some outside providers maybe not being as collaborative as we would like. So there was a little bit of a tension that would come on board, even with our own providers sitting at the table. So we didn't find, although it was great for students to be able to access those services during school time, right, when they were available, rather than having to go to that, I think that was prior to what we have available now for some students to be able to, and families to be able to access with the virtual services.
Yeah, so the virtual service is something, excuse me, is a virtual service something we are paying, or is it paid through their health insurance?
We pay for Care Solace, but those what they do through Care Solace is again like a broker.
Mm-hmm.
So they hook people up with their insurances. They find out which people are accepting clients. They help manage that, where they might give a parent a few names to call, help them set up appointments, and then they follow up with the families afterwards to see how it went.
Okay.
But then those charges were charged towards the insurance.
But the service you're providing into the schools is not something that you don't see how we can make it that those services are being provided and being reimbursed by the health insurances. It doesn't sound like you.
Not at this point, no, because the providers weren't willing to sign the memorandums of understanding that we had put in place.
Okay. All right. So I have a lot of notes. I'm sorry. So we got it that all the grants are in, and the budget was 27, the level service 27. So I've watched all your meetings, all the very long meetings, along the being meetings here, so I have made notes while watching the meetings. So I'm gonna just share some of my thoughts as I went through it. Not too much, you guys have very fluid meetings, so my thoughts are gonna be sort of fluid. So, we're in a budget crunch. It's like second year in a row. Generally speaking, I feel like last year, it kind of came at us, really hard, and the community kind of got together and we passed the override. I can tell you that, there were 4 votes from my household, the support of that, and it felt like that's what we needed to do. But, I do feel like, and I'm watching what the school committee, because these are the school committee decisions. We have 2 members of them here. But I am curious to see where we're going to end up with some of those decisions, because I do feel like town residents have, shown up for the schools where needed. But I see some of the reluctancies on some of the things that it's coming up in terms of, should we do this, should we do that? And we get a, what it was that Scalabrine was saying, everyone needs to get a haircut. And my kids just graduated, less than a decade ago. My daughter was the last year of the old high school. My kids never went to a new school in Lunenburg. When my kids went, we didn't have middle school sports. All of that system was supported by the school, by Youth Sports League. There was a lot of assistant coaches that, volunteered their times. There were, the structure of the athletic department was very different. And I do think Mr. McAuliffe was a teacher as well. He was not a full-time AD. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Okay. So Ms. McAuliffe was not a full-time AD. He acted as the AD. There was a part-time secretary. And now we have a full-time AD. We still have the secretary. We have expanded services to have middle school sports. And when I look at the enrollment for the schools, it's still about the same that was when my kids were in school. We were in town when we had we went through the Great Recession, and I think it was in 2009, 2010, there was established school bus fee. And one thing I can tell you about the school bus fee is that not just it's a little more income for the schools that maybe pays for the half a teacher, but it disincentivizes people from just using the bus as a backup. Because I'll tell you, I live on Main Street, and there is a long line of cars picking up kids every day. The emergency situation we had at the primary was because there are parents there picking up their kids. So I think there is a little bit of I understand needing to get the kids to school, but it's, we gotta be willing to make some hard decisions that are uncomfortable. I mean, we just saw Monty Tech here just saying, we're gonna pick you up in this location, that's it, and the parents need to be ready to sign up. So there is a little bit of both sides from the parents and the school community that needs to be willing to do some of these things. It's not always going to be easy. So I see the school bus fee as something reasonable, something we should institute, and something that hopefully will disincentivize people from just using the school as a backup plan. Because it's still, Lunenburg is a small community. People can always find someone else to help. There is the teen center for the older kids, the high school. So there are means to do. We don't need to have this blanket, let's offer school to everybody and have this long line of traffic on every entrance to every school with parents picking up the car. I mean, if we can reduce a bus, that's close to a teacher, and that's important. I saw one of your slides that you had on this 95-page thing was about the average class size. And initially it looked like you had, like a high school would have, from 5 to 17 kids. And then you look at the primary, it's 23. But I also, because my kids, I know how the high school schedule works, are the student loads that teachers are taking at the high school at a similar level as the primary school? Because that wasn't very clear. Like, I remember with my kids in math, because they were doing the advanced math, one class would be like 25 kids, the next class was 14, but overall, the teachers tend to have a pretty even out number of students that they have to take care of it.
So it's a little bit different. I was a high school teacher, and my total roster for a year was 125 students, whereas a first grade teacher, their total roster might be 23 students. But they have to teach all subject areas. I just had to prep one subject area.
Right. So they will have 23 times 5. Okay.
Right?
Right.
And I think it's challenging to find the best way to represent the class size numbers at the high school level in a way that's accurate and fair.
Sure.
Because, some advanced placement classes may have 22 students in them. Others may have 9. We have, you can see if you were to run a list of all of the different courses that we offer, you might see a French 4 honors, and you might see a French 4 college prep level. And the numbers might be low, but those 2 French 4 courses are actually being taught simultaneously by one teacher in the classroom. The classes are combined.
Okay.
So when you run the numbers, the number of kiddos taking this version of French 4 versus this version of French 4 looks really small, but the teacher actually has both of those in the room at the same time and is differentiating. There are different requirements for the kids who are taking the honors level in that same class. So
Sure.
It's a challenge. We have a small school. We want to offer a variety. And, we're fortunate that there are teachers that have a lot of passion for their subject area and want to be able to offer all of these things and are willing to combine a college prep level with an honors and just differentiate in the classroom. So, yes, you'll see that the ranges of class sizes for each subject area can be as few as 5 and upwards of 20-something. But until you really dig in to see exactly what that looks like, it's just a challenge to try to represent it accurately.
I think what caught my attention was the slide, and Mr. Peter Beermore, when the principal from the high school came to talk about the catalogs offering, Lunenburg chose to not regionalize. We accepted that we're going to be a small school district. If we're offering a whole broad of catalogs of offerings, it's something we would love to, but we chose not to by not regionalizing. So we just got to understand that, we're a small school, we got to behave like a small school. We're not going to have all the offerings that larger regional schools have. And trying to achieve that, I don't think it's feasible. So we end up, not using our resources in the best way. And that's been the thought, small school. And that was a little bit of my thought regarding the middle school sports. And I know I have heard that, it's only $6,000. Whenever we, as a small school, and that goes for a small business too, you're not going to do everything. You got to really focus on what you do and do extremely well. We're never going to be a powerhouse in sports. We should try to have good athletics. But I don't think we should have every sport under the sun. I understand things change and interest shifts. But, and that's the kind of thing that I think we need to be cautious about and not overexpanding. Because, in the core, let's say, I'm going to just use the athletics as an example. My kids were there 10 years ago. We had an AD that was a teacher, did an AD, and he had a part-time person now. Mm-hmm. And youth sports was mostly supported by, youth organizations or parents, if they wanted. They took their kids all the way to New Hampshire or whatever to do, their sports program. It's just where we are. We are a small district. So trying to expand our offerings too much, we're just not serving the students, the majority of students well, if we just keep expanding, trying to expand our offerings. And both of these kind of fall in my same type of thinking. So I know the curriculum director is a new position that you reestablished when you came in, or with COVID?
No, it was with COVID.
It was a COVID, okay.
Yeah,
And that's
we
something you
had to
didn't
pivot
have-
that year. Teachers had to teach online. We didn't have online curriculum resources for them to stream their instruction.
Right.
There was a lot of pivoting going on. We had to vet a lot of new materials, provide a lot of training for teachers. It was going to be really important to have somebody oversee and make sure that the quality of what we were using for online resources also met some of the safety standards that we have to be able to provide for our students. So that's when that position came in, and initially it really was connected to making sure that we could deliver the best quality that we could under very strained circumstances.
Sure. Are the instructional coaches also new COVID positions?
They didn't come in during the COVID year. They came in afterwards. In part, there were some other grants that were available to us, and we used some grant resources for those positions. But when you look holistically at trying to build in the right kind of infrastructure for a district to be able to focus on student achievement, student progress, student growth, ensuring that you have the strongest whole class instruction is one of the best things that you can do to minimize the number of students that struggle and need additional support.
Sure.
So the coach piece in that regard is really important. But the coaches, that's just one part of the work that they do.
And they work with the teachers, not the students.
They work directly with the teachers. In some situations, they work directly with the students as well. They run data analysis from our benchmark assessments and screeners and such, so that the teachers get these breakdowns and reports.
How many
so that they can use that information to target the design of the instruction to reach the students that they have in the room.
How many instructional coaches does the district has?
Right now, we have 2.
Okay.
A year ago, we would have had 3 positions because we had enough grants to fund those. But then with reductions in funding, that was one of those positions was eliminated as part of the ESSER reduction, even with the override budget.
Sure.
Last year.
So, we're talking about 3 curriculum-related instructional coaches. One thing that I offer is, Massachusetts teachers are the best educated teachers in the country. We are cutting teachers, and there's a lot of teachers that we're cutting. It's scary. I know we went through the period that we went, we needed support, but going from 0 in 2019 to now must have 3 while we were cutting, teachers by the dozen.
Yep.
I definitely have watched your meetings. I definitely saw everything. It's just, it just doesn't seem, is it a nice to have? Yes, but it goes back to what I was saying, that we're a small school district. We got to act like a small district.
Yep.
And
So,
it's
just
hard
for
to believe that
clarification-
we go from 0 and doing well to now we must have 3 highly paid positions.
So we don't have 3 anymore. We cut 1. We don't have 3.
Well, I'm talking
and they
with
were
the
all.
curriculum director plus the 2 instructional.
So the curriculum director is not the same thing as
Right.
the coach.
But they are there to support the teachers on teaching the classroom.
Yes, but they also really oversee and provide direction for the entire district relative to curriculum and instruction. That position in particular has been pivotal in securing a variety of grants that help us fund what we're doing to improve the quality of the materials that our teachers have access to, the quality of the instruction in the classroom at a K-12 level. And the coaches, again, they've all been funded through grant monies. So they are not,
now?
even including next year.
Okay.
They are grant-funded positions. And as I have explained, Title I grant monies, I can't use to restore a second-grade teacher. There are parameters around how those monies can be used. So it's not as if we could get rid of the coaches and just apply those grant monies to put back a third-grade teacher and a fifth-grade teacher, as an example.
So I definitely watch your meetings. You went on this 90-page presentation, you had quite a bit of, information, and you had, your direct staff, and you talked a lot about your leadership team and how you guys came to the recommendations that you made. One thing, I couldn't help but be thinking over and over, were the teachers part of that? Teachers are the people that we number from going to school more than anyone, and they are the most impactful people in the student's life, and again, Massachusetts have the best teachers in the country, period. So, when I saw your presentation, it felt to me like maybe not every party had been represented on that plans because it was the leadership, it felt much like a silo recommendation. And of course, when you're working with people who thinks alike, you guys are gonna get into a plan that you all agree to. So I actually would invite you to bring this agreement to some of your planning, bring
I
other.
can assure you that there is.
There you go, and bring other stakeholders to the planning, because it very much felt like one-sided, and I was itching to hear what the teachers felt. So I don't think we can support the athletics at the level that we've been supporting. We have definitely increased the support that we have had since 10 years ago. I think we need to just realize what it is to be in a small school, in a small athletic, and some parents might drive their kids far, and some parents may not. I think in the end of the day, most parents won't, because life is really hard. Most parents are having to work 2 jobs. It's limited our ability to be driving kids around. So we just got to really, show that taking austerity measures everywhere. Because when we go to ask the town for more support, we got to be able to show that we did this due diligence. So, nominal school bus fee, one that, with logic why we're doing, making sure that we're not expanding offerings that we don't need to because we're a small district. I think those are the things that will put us into, getting us into a position of possibly asking the town again for more funding outside what they're already paying. It's really hard. And no, I had parents, but I am a parent and I just had kids in school. But it's hard when I hear the school committee members saying that we can't eliminate uniforms from the budget, because last year the Booster Club was going to buy, and they said, no, it will be in the budget next year. When we just asked the entire town to put their hands in their pocket and take an extra average $200 a year in order to support what you have. It's hard to ask the town to do that again when we have not raised athletic fees in 10 years. So, I hear all the passion that the school committee members have and about, the ability to offer school, free school for everybody, but we need to realize where we live. Something else that I'll say to all parents out there and school committee is that Lunenburg has about 11,000 people living in town. Our high school graduating class is about a little over 400. Our high school is 400 kids, right?
Roughly, we have graduating classes usually about 100.
100, yeah.
Yep.
So we have Westford, which has double the population than Lunenburg. Their graduating class is about 800 kids. It's about the double the number. So their high school is 800, so they're usually graduating a little over 200 kids. Wayland, which is where my other business is, it's the same thing. It's smaller than Lunenburg, has a much bigger graduating class than Lunenburg. One thing that's interesting, and I know you can say house prices and everything, but our average single-family household taxes for Lunenburg is about $6,500. Westford is over $14,000. Wayland is $18,000. If we don't keep a diverse demographic in town, the cost of sending kids to school is going to be much higher because everyone is going to have kids, just like they do in Wayland, just like they do in Westford. So there is an interest for the school community to kind of wanting to keep us engaged, the empty nesters. I'm an empty nester, I'm not even 50. I could have another 30 years here. But, you got to convince me of that. And when I hear this, we already put our hands in our pocket, but the other side, it's not willing to do some of these small measures that it's going to be less than what they're paying extra a year on their taxes. And they're asking me to do it again. It's very difficult. The last thing, Mr. Chair, I'm going to just read. I actually wrote this because I didn't want to be saying this next part without having written, because I can get a little excited. I want to express my exasperation over how late the town was made aware of the challenges with the school budget once again this year. Last year, we faced a significant shortfall due to the expiring federal grants and rising healthcare costs. In response, many residents worked hard to pass the override, securing an additional $1 million. Despite that effort, now we are facing an even larger deficit. I had written more than 2.5 because I was basing on the 29 million, but I guess it's more than 1.9 million, which was first publicly presented on the February 5th meeting. The 1.9 was presented yesterday. A second meeting on February 26th explored potential ways to address this shortfall, but the timing of this discussion is troubling. By the time this deficit was brought forward, options were already limited, and the ability to engage all stakeholders in a meaningful way had been significantly reduced. To say that this delay was caused by the transition in the town manager position is a weak explanation. We now all know the town is limited to increasing our tax revenue by 2.5%. A 5% will never increase. A 2.5% is what we always should be planning. I'm frustrated that the school committee did not request a preliminary budget from the superintendent last fall and work on finding the best way to manage this deficit in a way that would benefit the most students. Had this been done, there would have been more time to assess the situation, weigh different solutions, and make informed decisions that best service our students and community. Instead, we are now in a position where we are faced with tough choices that must be made under pressure, and which is far from ideal. And I think that's what we are dealing with now. Moving forward, I hope this serves as a learning opportunity, better planning earlier and having the discussions earlier. That way it will help ensure that we are not caught off guard in the future budget cycles. We need to be more proactive in our approach, one that follows for transparency, thoughtful decision-making, and meaningful community input. I really don't understand why this budget came so late. And I think ultimately this lies with the school committee. It's their responsibility to set the priorities for the district. We should always be planning for 2.5% increase. And again, in Westford, the superintendent there sent his budget and his memo for the budget on December 9th. And that gives us time to discuss and to make the best decisions versus now we are 10 days away from the warrant closing. So hopefully next year we won't be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya?
I don't think we should be comparing our schools here to Westford or Wayland. It's a very different community.
I'm comparing the process, so just make sure, I'm not comparing the schools.
Yeah,
I'm comparing the process they went through.
Yes, but it's apples and oranges, different communities. I also think we need to look more at the data on what athletics does for our students, middle school and up. What confidence gives them for, for their future, and what coaches can do, and what having a full-time AD can do. So I don't think cuts there are good. Might be able to look at the busing. I think that's a good place to start to see what we're doing. But that's my 2 cents. I grew up, here, and I've just moved back here from a city, so it's different. So I'm still learning, and I'm learning a lot from you every day.
Well, you're not.
But that's just my opinion on a couple of things that you said. And yes, the school committee does have a responsibility to be a little bit more proactive in bringing things forward. But I think with a new town manager and, new people on the school committee, like, I see a process that's going to be improving. So, yeah. What about you?
Well, I'd just like to say, first thing, my view of this whole thing is that I am not an educator. I am not. I'm on this board. I understand budgets. I understand money. I understand numbers. I have family that are educators. My kids went from kindergarten to graduation in Lunenburg and had a great education. So my comments are to the school committee and to you guys is to continue your process. I think it is a difficult process. It is a very messy process. It is a lot of people have a lot of feelings. We're talking about our kids, and I know that. I understand that. And people have strong emotional feelings. There are people, and that is normal. However, what you're doing, I think, is moving in the right direction, trying to get to where we can say, okay, we don't get everything we want, but we get more. Do we need to do an override? Okay, maybe that's possible, maybe it isn't. This is what we need to do. You need to talk about it, need to discuss it, and need to have thoughts about it. I remember last year, there were 40 budgets out there, and we were, what budget are you talking about? And I was frustrated about it, but I understand that we're trying to get to the right answer. Everybody wants our kids well-educated, and does that mean busing fees or athletic fees? The only thing I will make a recommendation is that we think about the kids that parents don't have a lot of money, and how do we, if we're going to set a fee up, how do we do that? Maybe we work with parents, teachers, and say, can we, get to, advertise a fund or whatever, or other things. You guys can figure that out. But, we're not a poor town. We're not Wayland. We're not Westford. But we're not Fitchburg, and we're not Athol. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just, we have a little bit more resources. So whatever it is that you guys, school committee and you guys can come up with, as long as it makes sense, I will be supporting it.
Thank you.
I'd like to say the same thing. Just hearing those students last night, what it means to them for their mental health, for their growth, for teamwork. To cut athletics, I don't think is the right way to go. And the same with music. There have to be some tough decisions made, and I don't envy any of you having to make those decisions. But the closer we can get to a final number, the better it's going to be for all of us. Because if there does have to be another override question, it's better to have the justifications and be able to show people why it had to be this way. So I wish you the very best in making these decisions, and I hope that it goes well for you.
I asked some questions this morning and got some of the answers. I do want to point out, though, that, salary increases alone are a 3.6% increase over last year's budget. In our normal steady state, that's more than we typically dedicate to the, so that left no room for anything else. And I don't want to get into an argument about, whether our teachers are underpaid and everything else, but I do think we got to take that into account as we're negotiating. I do kind of resonate with a lot of what Anna mentioned. I do think, sports are important. My kids all played sports. I played sports in high school and growing up, and I do kind of think, though, that like at that middle school level and below, we do have organizations that can do that. I also want to say, and I think I mentioned this, I don't know, I forget who I talked to today, but sending kids to the Reggie Lewis Center every weekend is an exorbitant expense, and I don't see the need for it. My son did indoor track, and they went to Fitchburg. And if it's all about a banked track to shave off 0.2 of a second on your personal best, if you're really that level of an elite athlete, you're probably doing, the equivalent of AAU or club sports or something like that. So, the benefit of that is rather low. I do see the benefit of sports. I do. Let me see, let me kind of go through this. I do, though, agree with, the position that, the school committee has not gone through their process yet. And I appreciate, kind of giving us a heads up as to where we are, a heading check again. We're going to have to come back, once a budget is finalized to present it to us in a Delta fashion. So one question I would have, because I've been talking with town manager about how to kind of get through the budget season into annual town meeting, is when do we think we would, what is the plan? And I guess that's, Brian, you're on the phone there. When do we think that might be?
Yes, we do have a meeting with the select board on Tuesday, and then we have an us. Can you hear me?
I can't hear him at all.
No.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. So we do have a meeting Tuesday scheduled with the select board, and then we followed that up with another meeting, a special meeting on Wednesday, and we hope to finalize it on Wednesday.
She's saying next Wednesday?
We do, yeah. We have a meeting next Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll be able to finalize it.
Okay, so based on Thursdays, it sounds like the best one might be like the 20th. That would give you a week to prepare. Because next week, we do have municipal building in here, Marshall Park, any other moneyed articles. We'll have to make a determination whether we're doing capital plan tonight or next week. It's getting late. Okay, so we'll have to work through. The other question, though, is when do we collectively make the decision as to whether we're pursuing an override or not? Because that has to factor into the warrants. It has to factor into our voting. It has to factor into the level of discussions we have going on, whether we, so what do we see as the timeline on that? Is that part of the discussion for next week at the?
Tuesday. Yeah, I would expect that conversation to happen on Tuesday.
I can't hear. I don't think these speakers are on, and I say that all the time.
From what I understand,
Can you hear?
that will be part of the discussion between the school committee and the select board on Tuesday evening.
Yes.
I am not sure if there will be a resolution that night, but the warrant does close
about some options that we may have in relation to the warrant. One of which is whether or not we can still place an article if we don't have a final figure. That answer is yes, although it becomes complicated.
Okay.
We're going to talk about it Tuesday, and then if necessary, we'll talk about it more on Wednesday, but there's not going to be a lot of changes, so I don't think this is going to drag on. The conversation
Okay.
shouldn't drag on. We should have fingers crossed.
Okay. Lost my thought. Oh, yeah. We don't usually schedule other departments when school comes on, but I think it was kind of fortuitous for Council of Aging to go right before you.
Because I'm retiring and I'll have something to do?
I am eligible to go to the council, to senior center myself. Very humbling thought. There's a couple of our smaller departments that are asking for some increases. And I hope that even though the schools is going through their second year of some problems, that we do support that some of these other departments do need some growth, and it is small dollars. And specifically, the ones I'm thinking of is Council on Aging going to a full-time, so I hope there's not like pushback from, the school and the extended school commit, that's not needed. The other one that I'd like to see is the rec director going to a full-time. And there is kind of the hatchlings of a plan that ultimately becomes a self-funded position. And I do want to say along those lines, the ability for that to become a self-funded position is that position does focus on recreation, summer camps, et cetera. I heard last night the school's looking to potentially augment their budget with a summer camp. I would highly recommend not doing that.
If I could offer some thoughts on that. I think the kind of camps that we're talking about aren't necessarily camps limited in that scope. In the past, they've done sort of an abbreviated summer league kind of a thing. This would be for our high school student athletes, not so much running camps per se for little guys to come. There might be a clinic kind of a thing that our captains from each of our teams, they've done that before, where they've kind of done a quick round robin thing where they expose the little guys to the different sports that they would have access to at the high school level. But in the past, it's really been more about the high school athletes that ideas around a camp have come forward.
Okay,
so I think potentially there's not conflict there.
Yeah.
Because I'll offer my thoughts. Angela Clement is doing a phenomenal job. She's been great to work with, and she's putting together great things for the kids. We're about great things for the kids. So we definitely would want to see whatever program expansion that she could be doing take off, because it benefits the kids.
Okay.
So I
with
think
Chris
that there's
on
still
that.
room for us.
The youth things that you're talking about, the round robins, leave that to the recreation department. The high school athletic camps to improve your high school athletes stays with the high school.
Yeah, I think that we
There
can
very
find ways to
distinct split there.
coexist.
Okay.
And not be in competition with each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's certainly my ask, and I, obviously there's discussions on that would need to be had, and again, I had the same discussion at one point with the library, right? I do not think the library should be offering rec departments and doing it for free when the rec department is trying to fund, charge for it. So, So again, my only point being that there are other needs in town. There's other plans that have been long in the making that may not come to fruition because we're having such problems in the schools, right? So we have hard decisions this year ahead of us. You know, there's going to be do we need an override? Do we need an override for both schools and the town side? We know the fire department wants to add a shift, which most of the state has moved to. We know that, you know, Marshall Park has been planned for years and has had a lot of support up until the point where we were having huge budgetary problems. And we know that this building and Ritter are up for items. So this year is going to be kind of a year that Lunenburg is really going to decide what it wants for its future, right? So maybe that sounds a little dramatic, but I kind of believe it, right? So, but I thank you for saying that you do support both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said before, we have great working relationships with really all the town departments. And I've said before, I need for their most urgent priorities to be met too, because if they're not, then they can't be supporting us in the many ways that they do. And that's a loss for us when that happens. So I would not be one to advocate that other departments go without meeting their critical needs, because having their needs met, they support our needs. So it's important.
You know, the other thing the Monty Tech had mentioned is perhaps they have the ability through their vocations to help with projects. The other thing I think the school has to offer is, you know, through National Honor Society and maybe other civic-minded engagements to try to promote those volunteer requirements, which I think are still National Honor Society requirements, towards the needs of the towns, right? Whether it's, you know, whatever it is, right? Let's try to get maybe folks helping to close these budgets through volunteer work as well. So just a thought on that one. But again, I appreciate you all coming tonight. I know we hoped that it would be a more normal budget season. Certainly it's not. And we'll have to work through the remainder of the calendar. So.
Definitely.
But with that, is there anyone in the public that had any questions?
Ron Delicia, 181 Reservoir Road. I had left off in a public comment to the school committee last night asking about or commenting that I favored teachers over social workers. And I had, much like Ms. Lockwood, I had looked at all the slides related to the behavioral and mental health, all the statistics, and it seemed like 16% of the entire student population has some degree of need for it didn't specify, but I assume counseling or some type of intervention. But then I thought about it the opposite way. So if there's 16% that are having trouble in this area, there's 84% that do not need any kind of behavioral or mental health support. So I don't understand why all students are in Tier 1 and that we're having that subject. They're all in the Tier 1 SEL program. And I assume those social workers or someone similar is teaching that SEL special that all children have to take. And so when I hear 16%, that doesn't seem like a tipping point to where you would adopt such so much staff to address the problem. And I was thinking very much like what Ms. Lockwood said about the fact that most private and health insurance and Mass Health do pay for, they recognize mental health as a medical issue that they'll pay for. And so I was thinking of how can we outsource the problem so that children who need counseling or intervention can do it on their own time to allow them to get through a school day of just focusing on school. That was just my thoughts. Either that, get rid of the tier one, make tier one for those students who are in tier two, and then tier two becomes the tier three. So we're not targeting the entire population when we don't have to. It doesn't appear we have to. Thanks.
Thank you. I know there's questions. I do want to have a go back because something just popped in my mind. One other thing that I think I've heard, and I did send you an email on this, I think I've heard, is that the state, there's a lot of central office and administrative effort put towards reporting and audits of the school. I mentioned that to Representative Scarsdale, and she said she was unaware of these requirements. I think if we're going to start to look at the lack of Chapter 70 funds coming to us, I think the DESE and the state needs to start relaxing the amount of administrative burden they're putting on our educators. So with that in mind, if it is true that, and I take her at her word, she doesn't understand it, I don't understand the details of it. I would recommend that perhaps you put something together for her on that.
Sure.
And share it with her so that we can maybe get some relaxation on this.
Sure. I just shared with you another document, and it is a document that's linked into the mega slide deck of 95 slides. It's got to do with the unfunded and underfunded mandates. This document doesn't exist anywhere. We've been working to compile it. It is not complete at this point. There's a lot in there already, but I can't say that it's 100% complete. We needed to pivot and get some budget lines finalized. So we will continue to work on this document, but it sort of gives you a little bit of insight as to just the sheer volume of mandates and the kinds of people in our school district that have the responsibility for ensuring that those things are executed. I will let both Juliana Hanscom and Deb Bookus speak to the hours that they have spent prepping materials for Department of Education audits. And we have audits every year, one type of another. So I'll let Juliana speak to it first, but then I'll let Deb jump in on the hours of material gathering and reporting that has to be done.
So in my realm, there's a lot of audits that come my way. We just finished an OLA audit, which was an Office of Language Acquisition audit that audited our EL, our English Language Learner programs. And so we had to gather the documentation for that and submit that. And then they came out and they did interviews with staff, and then they did a final report. And so we had our exit interview last month, mid-February, and the auditor told me that I had to have the corrective, that we did really well, that we only had 4 areas that we needed to focus on, and that they weren't student-facing areas, they were more procedural, making sure we had things in place moving forward. 4 areas, but that he needed a corrective action plan done, and he shared with me a very intensive document on how they wanted it put together. And he goes, and by the way, that's due March 5th. And I said, okay, well, thank you for that. I said, did you talk to your counterparts at DESE? Because I'm also going through a special education audit right now to where I can't even, it's taken me a couple of months to gather all of the documentation, and I actually had to chunk it. I had to be a teacher again and chunk it in order to get into getting all of the information pulled together for it. And I'm pretty organized, and I've gone through this before, so I'm thankful that I've got systems in place. I feel really bad for any new special education director out there who doesn't have the resources already built up that I've got. That being said, so all of that information was due to DESE for special ed on March 5th. And the OLA, the man from OLA, he goes, I'm so sorry about that. I said, okay. I said, I'll get this done. My EL teachers are fabulous, and they help to pull together the resources. Deb Book is also, we were coordinating with Deb as far as our corrective action plan. But that's just one instance of where I've got multiple agencies from the state coming at me, giving me the same deadlines for things, and it can get very overwhelming to try to get it all done. We got it all done, and the state, for special ed, they're coming out next month to audit, to finish the audit and do interviews and walkthroughs of the buildings, and then they'll have a corrective action plan if they find any needs that I have to address further on that, and then that's going to continue. So that's just one piece. That's one instance of this year where, like, I really wanted to go through the Zoom at him and say, can you please talk to the guy down the hall, and can you at least give me like a week in between? Because I was really thankful that the OLA was going to be done and like I could move on to focus on special ed without them both needing to be done at the same time.
We also had an audit for food services, and that was, again, another lengthy gathering of information, site visits, audits. The Massachusetts School Building Authority, they decided that this year they were going to do what I call the state of all the schools in the entire state. We had to go through hundreds of questions for each of our buildings in a survey. Then we had to get on a Zoom for each of our buildings where they read those same hundreds of questions and asked us the answers, literally an hour and a half to 2 for each school. And then they came out to tour all of the buildings to see for themselves all of the things that they asked the questions about. Again, hours and hours of people's time not doing the job that they're hired to do because they're involved with all of this other work. Deb, did you want to jump in on?
Sure. In October, we were notified that we were being audited for all of our entitlement grants, and that's Title I, Title IIA, and our Title IV grant. All of that documentation was due on February 14th. That requires that we provide documentation from FY24 as well as from FY25. So sometimes it requires going back and finding those documents, making sure that we have everything in place. Everything from policies and procedures to some of our assessment results for our students to also how we engage our families and the community. In addition, it's a desktop audit, so it required that we send all that documentation to the Department of Ed. In addition to that, throughout the year, the department will provide for us different meetings where we can learn about some of the changes that are happening around those audits each year and some of the requirements. They also often, and I know Juliana has dealt with this as well, they change the platform that we're working, so sometimes we also have to learn the platform in order to send that documentation. So in addition to the entitlement grants, we were also responsible for the Student Opportunity Act, which requires not only the plan, but the follow-up to that, as a mid-year audit. That's actually due in a couple of months, still awaiting some of the instructions. And so each year, we really don't, they give us some heads up, but usually it's a few months' worth of time to get all that documentation together.
It sounds like you have like a reaction to these audits as opposed to a proactive having everything already together when it comes. Like,
No.
we shouldn't be chunking things together and trying to frenzy gather things. Is
In-
there
in-
like a process or a policy that you guys have as a team where you have things ready to go?
We know when the audits are coming usually a year in advance. They post them on the website, except I'm not sure if the Title Ones, if they still do that, is not sure if it's more of a surprise. We're auditing you like the IRS might, type things. In special education, we have a pretty well set where they'll say you're in group A this year, you're in group B next year. So I went on Christmas time. In January, I'm on the phone because I noticed that there were problems with what they told me in the paperwork and what I was seeing on one of the new platforms. And the man from DESE told me, "Oh, you're the first one in my group who started working on this. And yep, we've changed over to a new platform. There's a little bit of a glitch. So just ignore that part on this and then fill in this and then enter it into the document library instead of where it asks for it. And then we'll work with you on it." But it's really, you're the first one that's called me about this because there's a change.
So
So
it's a lack of process on the auditor's side as opposed to your side.
it is ever
Yeah,
changing.
I was going to
And-
say, like, the point of audits are usually to not have the same process because they want to see.
I'm talking about
They
their
want to
their
collect the same
platform.
information, though.
It's their platform that they changed
Yeah,
on
they do
DESE, so the platform,
I think we're clear that
Yeah.
audits aren't fun. I think also.
necessary. They
We're
are
clear that they
necessary.
take up a lot of time. And as a former banker, I don't think anybody who was a banker knows that we get audited, examined more than anybody. State, federal, insurance, our own auditors, our internal oh, God. And I was in lending, that was even worse. So I get it. However, and I'm just saying this only to take the other side, there's a lot of valuable information that comes from that. Not only data that they can use to make things better, but also to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do, and also to find out that, oh, you know what you're doing there isn't the right thing, maybe you should do it like this, because a lot of other places do it like that, that's how it works. Oh, okay, so there's value to it. Now, I'm not saying, and I'm sure, state and federal agencies don't run as efficiently as they could, and they also have probably not the best software, that's just the way those things go, and you guys spend more time than you should. And I get that, and I understand that, but, to just play the other side, that there's a lot of value that comes from it. It's all I wanted to really say. And I do, as somebody who has dealt with the kind of guys you dealt with, no, we got to get this thing done. I need these 14 files all downloaded. And this is before scanning was a big thing, That was a lot of work. So I get it. But it is not the end of the world, and it does take up a lot of time, and it is a pain in the butt.
It does. And I can appreciate for all the reasons why you said, like, I want to make sure that we're in compliance fully to meet the needs of all of the students and doing what we need to do for the state. The problem is that all of this time, I'm still one person.
Right.
I'm not in a big district where I can ask somebody else to do it for me. So it takes my focus maybe away from some of the more front-facing things that I'd like to be doing in the buildings with staff. So it's that trade-off. And yes, I've got a ton of folders, and like I actually work with a state listserv where we share folders back and forth, so we're trying to be consistent throughout the state. So that's been very helpful. And yes, it is very helpful, but it's still a lot, and it still seems like they continue to pile things on. But we'll get through it.
I also want to add this. As a small district, there's no difference in the expectations. Small and large districts have the same accountability in these audits to the Department of Education. So I think they are.
Districts just have more staff
Right.
that can help.
Yeah, so I think they're extremely valuable, and I think that we all learn a lot from them. So just the scope of the responsibility, there's no difference in the expectation.
Okay, so if you could maybe pull something as a response back on that, and I don't think you can give a 1.3% Chapter 70 increase year after year and expect this level of auditing to go on. Because we hire you to be student-facing, not some bureaucrat in either Beacon Hill or, I don't know if there's federal audits, or, you know, or in Washington. And I don't know the value of a lot of these audits, to be honest with you. Finance, I got it. I'm a defense I work for a defense contractor. We get it audited all the time, and I don't see the value in it. So,
Well, like I said, there's a very lengthy list of all kinds of things that we have to do, report on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just audits. And again, this document doesn't exist anywhere. The state doesn't have a document that summarizes everything that you know, communities are all required to do. Every school district is required to do.
Okay.
And it's a challenge, right? Because, you know, Mr. Schoenbrini, through the budget task force, kept talking about how to parse out what in our budgets, all of our budgets, are legally mandated. Pretty much almost everything we do has some sort of mandate attached to it. But it gets really hard to tease out, well, this is a dollar we have to spend because it's mandated versus this 50 cents is something that we don't have to spend, because there's so much crossover and it's hard to tease it apart. But it just to scroll through it just gives you a sense of the sheer volume of mandates that we deal with.
yeah. Maybe ChatGPT could just fill them all out for you. I don't know. All right. Sorry for that interlude. John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi, everyone. John Bowen, 162 Highland Street. Just on that conversation, that wasn't what I was going to discuss. Just on that conversation alone, I can say this, that all those audits, all that mandatory reporting requirement, and all of that comes down to the Department of Education in Washington. And that is a mandate that's given to the state, that the state has to provide the federal government with that oversight so that the federal government can sit there and make a determination to whether or not the state is being compliant to the rule under Brown versus Board of Education, and, you know, one law after the other that came with that. So hopefully, our administrative staff in school, when we get rid of the Department of Education in Washington and return it back to the states, you guys will have a better handle on being able to audit your own district and then reporting that to the state in your own measure and your own means, and it'll be up to the state to figure out how it's done, because the state won't be able to run your individual town. That's what we call small government. That being said, I know a lot of people are not a fan of that, but I surely am. When it comes to mental health treatment for students, and it comes to academics and the combination of the social academic issues incorporated with the mental health academic issues and people's places where they are, the children's places where they are, I can say this just from my own experience, okay, is that this kind of system of setup and trying to cut off a mental health professional, saying that it's not going to work good with a academic professional, that there is mass health and things like that. Of course, there are those things, and there's medical treatment and mental health treatment outside of the school. The reason why the school has been handling mental health started in the Cellucci and Swift administration. Yep, going back a few years, just after Governor Weld. This is back in the 80s. They recognized that the nuclear family is broken down. They recognized that there were a lot of single-parent homes. They realized that there were a lot of divorces and a lot of multi-dimensional, I guess you could say, homes and issues with regard to that, that were causing issues with children to be able to receive services. Because either it was a single-parent home and the mother couldn't do it, or the father couldn't do it, you know, or it was a divorced home where the father wouldn't do it and the mother wouldn't do it. And they recognized that early on. And over the years, the nuclear family has broken down in such a way that we have a lot of mothers doing things and fathers doing things, but not mothers and fathers doing things. And that's the issue why we have people like Stacey Canfield, we have people like Lori Shea, we have people like Juliana Hanscom, we have people in these positions that deal with the special need, the mental health, and so on and so forth with the children in our schools, strictly because parents weren't able to do it for a number of years and they created their positions. The secondary issue is, you tell me, is there a parent who can stay home today and mental health their children? No, we need the school to do that. And I know that sounds kind of, I don't know, government control, and trust me, I'm not one for big government. But, you know, you can't take both of those things away. You need both of them. So if you're going to start cutting something, start cutting programs, okay? I'm sorry, okay? But, I mean, you know, I played Pop Warner football. I was on the basketball team. I was on a baseball team. I did this, I did that, I did this. And my father grabbed me by the back of my neck, threw me in the car when I said I didn't feel like going. He said, too bad you're going. And I went. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, he drove me. I didn't get on a bus. Everybody didn't have a bus, and everybody didn't go together. When you went together and you were on a bus, it's because you were varsity, and that's it. You were varsity, you were 11th grade, 12th grade varsity, and that's when you took a bus where you wanted to go. And that's when there was one bus for the varsity team only. And that's how that worked. And it worked. And so when we start talking about cutting things, the two things you should never cut from school, if you want to cut a paraprofessional out, okay, that overloads a teacher, but you know what? Teachers are pretty resilient. They'll figure it out. You need to increase the classroom size by 7 kids per class. Now you're at 20, maybe 18, you got to increase by 7. Don't worry, teachers can figure that out. You know, they're very talented, okay, at being able to manage, okay, including unruly students, okay? Trust me, I was one. So the thing is that you can't take away that team. You can't take away the mental health and the academics. You can't separate it because it is heavily intertwined because of our environmental standards of what we basically have as a culture, and it's necessary. It's not getting done at home, and I think Juliana will tell you that herself, okay, that you know, there are kids that have needs that they're not getting at home, that parents are being told they need to do things. The school's hands are tied. The parents aren't doing them. Who's going to fulfill them? Because what's going to end up happening is they're going to ask, what's the matter with this kid and why is this kid not learning? And why is this kid having all these problems and why isn't the school helping? And that's what it's going to come down to. So that's just to say that you got to have both. You can't cut mental health professionals and you cannot cut teachers to the extent where you know you're losing grip. And I'm trying to find the exact word, but I think Juliana understands where I'm coming from, and I think Ms. Burns does too. Okay, is that if you do not have a well-rounded approach to education that is both social, okay, mental and academic, if you don't have that and you take one of those components out, now you end up with a failing school. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Good evening. Laura Barusian, 389 Mulpus Road. The school committee heard me last night, so I'm not going to take a lot of time to repeat what I had to say last night. I'm here on behalf of a 9th grade band student as well as the music aiders. One question I had, I completely agree. I'd love to see the 3-column color slide with consistency. I'm a CPA too, so it's driving me crazy. There's increases here. There's no parentheses there. And I'd love to see it too. I think it would be very helpful, as we've got to prioritize. We need to focus on where the big dollars are. The band travel budget got slashed. $8,900 got cut. We have 140 kids that'll be on the band in the spring concert in May. But we have 100 kids that are going to go to, a music competition. We don't have a bus. So Music Aiders is going to step in. We're going to help. The kids are going to get there. We're not going to take that away from them. But $8,900 is not going to fix $1,572,000 or $1,970,000, whatever that was. I'd love to see that list by priority as well. Where are the biggest increases? And how does that go down? Because it just, to say expense cuts just removed or just added, there were a bunch of numbers on those pages. So seeing some of those things in order as well, with a little bit more specificity. I'd also, just a question, do we have the fiscal year that we're in now, actual to budget? Has anybody looked at an actual to budget?
For the
the
school
current
committee
year?
or the town?
For the current year, for the school?
I do think the town finance director has it, but.
Because I tried to find it, I didn't see
But
it.
the thing is, you're not gonna like this, but it's not reconciled as quickly as likely you're to reconcile the accounts.
I get it, but we're starting with a budget from last year. Have we overspent that budget by 500,000 already? Like, are we all, like, you're starting with a budgeted number from last year, but how did you do compared to last year?
You are
How
asking for
trending?
the school side, right?
School side, yes.
So.
So the school side,
Let's
so.
ask, do you have
So
a,
like seeing where you are, you're starting with the budget from last year and working off of that for town manager, for level set, for needs. But is your starting place the right place?
so,
We do quarterly budget reports for the school committee.
So are those shared?
They're part of the public meeting.
They're public.
as soon as they're in the public meeting, the public record.
They should be, okay. Are they on the school committee website?
They are.
Because this year's work papers too, under last year's heading on the school committee, they're not on the budget page, they're in the minutes. So just
They're
things
part
like
of the
that. So
school
just look
committee
at some of
regular
that. So they're in there?
meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to find those and see, because I was looking for them, I wasn't finding some of that. So I'd like to see kind of how we're trending.
When was the last,
We're actually due to have a quarterly budget next, the next scheduled meeting, not the new one that we just
the one that
added in
added.
for the
Okay.
budget conference.
So I have gone through because this year is still, we're a little over 6 months into, I went through into very fine detail for the FY '24. And the school budget was actually pre-spent because school departments, they can do line transfer within their own budget. I think the schools still need to get authorization from the school committee. So FY '24 is pretty much fully spent. The FY '24 for the whole town had a little extra, but the town does build extra because that's their practice.
Because I do remember last year, the conversation about the electric. I remember that specifically. And like not getting it to where it's actually what we're spending now. That money's coming from someplace else. So part of the exercise is a little bit circular, if you will, because it's going to you have to pay the light bill anyways. But having them set kind of where things are, it's a much more realistic approach. So that would be interesting to see, but thank you.
okay, so it sounds like that information would be available, and perhaps if she emailed you, Dr. Gilson, about that, you could provide it to her when
It'll be provided publicly at the next school committee meeting.
on your website. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. So Brian, maybe you can, you probably want to end your meeting?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'll look for a motion to adjourn at 10:47.
Second?
All right, we can do a roll call vote. Ms. Brzezowski?
Yes.
Ms. Archambault?
Yes.
And a yes for me. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so given what we talked about earlier, I'm going to skip over capital plan, I think, again, unless anyone wants to try to beat our record from last week. We have no old business. Is there anything, generally speaking, anyone wants to talk about for the FY '26 budget discussions? Anything on warrant articles or budget task force? All right, we had minutes sent to us, and they're in the folder from February 13th. Did anyone get a chance to look at those?
I didn't see them.
You haven't seen them?
I checked 2 days ago, so if it was in the last 2 days.
It probably was in the last
Yeah.
2 days. Okay, so why don't we wait till next week on those?
So those minutes, I don't think Mike and I were here for those meetings. If you probably will have enough to vote without us. I mean, technically we can vote.
I wasn't at that meeting either, though.
Oh.
But I did watch the.
Oh, okay.
The thing on the thing, so I could vote on it.
Okay.
Are you okay with us voting on it?
I'm fine with it, yeah.
All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 13th.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
You can, I'm going to call for all those approve, anyone object, and then abstain, so you can abstain.
Well, are you gonna vote?
I haven't read them, so I have to abstain, right?
No, you can vote, because
Yeah.
Mike and I technically were not as
But you-
part of the committee.
You can still vote, I think.
Okay, I'll vote.
But whatever you want. You can abstain,
I'll do
you
it.
can vote,
You're not
it
gonna
don't
have a
matter.
quorum if
Okay.
one of us
All right.
don't.
So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
All right, so we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 501.
When are we moving the capital planning to next week?
Yes, I will try to move it to next week. I will move it to next week.
So, are we gonna have any other weeks with 2 meetings, or no?
A what?
Is there any other week with 2 meetings?
I don't think we'll go into another two.
Okay.
Okay. I think if anything, we may just schedule into the first couple weeks in April.
Gotcha.
We're going to have to find a way to make recommendations, probably big recommendations on, those 3 things. Override, if it's an option, municipal building design, and then Marshall Park. Those are the 2 that are going to come next week. And then the normal warrant articles and stuff like that. We may have a path towards getting an extra week or 2 for the report to be finalized and our votes. We think we can maybe get the warrant printed quicker, but.
Oh, okay, that's good.
All right, any actions or topics for future meetings? All right, next Thursday is our next meeting. It is going to be a public hearing. We will likely have to have another public hearing. I've already posted it as a public hearing, though. We're kind of running everything almost as a public hearing. I may change that a little bit, because some of the public comments have been long. So we may need to put some constraints a little bit on that. But I do appreciate the public coming and being part of this. Is there any public comment from the public? Any public comment from the committee? All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all for bearing with